All right, folks, I'd like to call the meeting to order. If you'd all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. In terms of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Also, there was an executive session of the board at Arcola Intermediate School prior to this meeting for the purposes of discussing contract negotiations with the Methacton Education Association. By way of attendance, we have everybody here tonight except for Mr. Phillips. Now I want to turn it over to Dr. Zerby for our guest speakers and recognition.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening we have two guest speakers. We have Mr. Dan Sakala from Fidavia to talk about the facilities master plan, and we also have the MCIU to give an update on transportation. First of all, the facilities master plan. Mr. Sakala.
Good evening. My name is Dan Sakala. I am the principal of Fidavia. My colleagues have had the opportunity to present to you in the past. This is my first opportunity outside of the property committee with Herb, Kim, and Scott. So I just wanted to introduce myself and tell you that how much we appreciate the opportunity to serve. We take our service personally, and we're committed to results, and really just thank you for the opportunity to be here. So we started about 5 months or so, everyone should have a copy, with the idea of coming up with a master plan that we could then make decisions off of for the years to come. And I'm going to try and run through this. Some of this necessarily I think I have to go through in some level of detail. We had no preconceptions or direction other than to collect all the information that was produced over the course of years and try and distill it down to something that, again, could be useful in making decisions. And we knew pretty much from the beginning we would try and do that by coming up with two documents, a map, a simple map, and then the master plan, with the intent of trying to put all the information into one page, again, so it would serve as a useful roadmap for making decisions. So if I can first address the map. It's really a very simple map. It's a satellite view of the district with the various facilities located in their respectful location in context of roads, population, and we added some salient information, the school capacity, classroom numbers, and total rooms, the year it was constructed, and renovations. There's really nothing more exciting about the document other than that. It's just, and frankly, its usefulness will probably be more evident as we move through the process in the months and years to come, when you consider the district and the various buildings within the district and how they relate and serve the district. The next document is obviously more detail, the master plan, but feel free to interrupt me at any point if there's any questions. These are documents that we've reviewed with the property committee, and these are the latest iterations, and I'm happy. I mean, if the documents aren't clear and convey a clear, concise message about where we are and what needs to be done, then they're not effective enough, so I welcome criticism.
Dan,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to clarify something we had spoken about at the property committee meeting. The Arcola Skyview campus was previously combined into one number, and in looking at the total square footage, I wanted to confirm that those are correct.
Yes, they should be, yes. Yes, we've, as you point out, yeah, we've had many changes to this document over time, but yeah, the respective buildings should be separated and the individual information for each is correct. And furthermore, we added a footnote. Another comment that came up in the last meeting was to clarify capacity, and the derivation of that information is noted on the bottom right-hand corner. We just, to keep it consistent, we just took it right out of the report, so there was no mistake where it came from. Thank you. Now for the more the tiny document, the 11 by 17 document with the really tiny information. I think in order to give meaning to the information above, before even looking at the information above, if you'll sort of bear with me as I run through the footnotes at the bottom, the 9 footnotes at the bottom of the page, because they really kind of define the document. And again, in looking at the document, it is supposed to be your master plan over 10 years to address the needs that have been identified over the course of time and all the respective studies. And the first item, item 1 in the footnotes, that is just a listing of all the respective documents going back to the energy audit in 2011 through today, all of the documents that, I mean, you've probably seen there's a pile about that high of studies and documents that have been created over the course of time that this one page is supposed to summarize. The targeted budget, we have targeted a budget, we've sort of talked about several numbers, but we've been targeting a budget of $7.5 million per year over the course of 10 years, and with the goal of trying to prioritize the work within that budget constraint. And necessarily that was a tremendous constraint as we went through the process, because you have to work and plan within your means, and that was the number we were given as a target to work within. So obviously, based on how much money you actually allocate will determine how much work can be accomplished. Third item is values assumed. We utilized the AEM feasibility study and took those values at face value. However, the AEM study did not include soft costs, so in order to make this master plan most transparent and clear, in discussions with the property committee, we added soft costs to every single item on the page. And we did it, we had to come up with some methodology, so we settled on, basically, I won't read through all that, but basically, depending on the size of the project, determined the percentage of cost that we added to each of the scope items in order to give a true picture of the total cost for each of the items. And then we just put a footnote in here that the scope of work will necessarily be organized, planned, designed, performed in a more economical manner based on the actual conditions and analysis of the items as they are further addressed. So, any questions about that before I go on? Okay. Safety and security, number 4.
Sorry, can I ask one question? In terms of the values assumed, you mentioned just using AEM's numbers. We've seen already with Eagleville windows that some of those numbers have been off. I had thought as part of this plan that there would be a review of the report itself and a true diving into if those numbers were in fact accurate or not. But you're saying that there was really no in-depth look at the numbers that they claimed, you just used those numbers to make your plan?
The candid answer is, in going through the items, we necessarily saw, well, you know, this is really, it seems to us to be an inflated number, or maybe that's we need to add that some more money to that. But in terms of making decisions and being sort of even-handed about the whole thing, it seemed to, the most transparent thing to do would be to take the information was there and work with that information, because you can, I mean, we could have gone through an exercise and worked on all of these numbers, but we didn't think that would be fair. We thought the more honest thing would be to take the information at face value and sort it out. I mean, as the note says, even the work that's already been listed here, it's been listed in a way to try and make it more efficient so that things were done more sequentially. Because if you remember, the AEM study was more of an a la carte scope of work. It was basically taking everything as an independent item of work and assigning a price to it. Obviously, when you organize it in a logical sequence and fashion, there are efficiencies and economies. But to try and capture that in here, we thought would be disingenuous. We just thought the fair thing to do would be put it on face value. Here's our target, and beat all our targets.
And your response led directly to my second question, was the more economical manner of combining these things, right? I understand that maybe in some of the future years that might be harder to do, but in terms of our year one work that we have here, was this grouped, and the more economical numbers, were they included here, or again, this is still just AEM's numbers?
They're just AEM's numbers to answer the last question, but they are more economically grouped the way they're situated here.
Okay, so as a member of the Finance Committee, we may see some savings based off of the way that we've done this because of the way that it's been grouped?
Yeah, frankly, we would expect savings across the boards, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So that was item 3. Item 4.
Dan,
Yes.
I'm sorry, one question too.
Yes.
So I realize that you're using the number straight value as is. Did you use any inflationary factor as
No.
we look at 2026 now?
No, we did not add inflation. Item 4, safety. Item 4 is just safety and security. I mean, every study, anything you do in the context of a school has to talk about safety and security, and it's always paramount. So obviously, when we get to the construction phase, safety and security is the most important thing. Maximization of funds, this sort of addresses the question that was just raised, that effort was made wherever possible to group, organize, sequence, design, bid, and perform work in the most economical and least wasteful manner. Surgical, professional, investigative work will continue to support that effort. And again, this is a living document. Hopefully, it provides the sufficient information to year one to get the ball rolling, but as any, useful, logical document, we should be continually updating this and improving this as we go along. Item 6, no curriculum changes were contemplated. Although discussed, the current master plan does not contemplate any change to curriculum, for example, the half-day kindergarten. So we've taken the curriculum as is in laying this out. Similarly, item 7, with regard to Arrowhead, it was our opinion that at a minimum, Arrowhead warrants significant renovation and/or replacement in the near future. A global district-wide decision should be made in the next year or so that best serves the community in the most economical and long-term thinking manner. And based on that, we actually had done quite a bit of thinking about this. Based on that, we had recommended investigating further, and we kind of see, we think that's very important to discuss that in the next year or so. And then, item B, while not included in this final draft to the district, our analysis has included options that A, maintained Arrowhead in its current configuration, which is what you're looking at right here. B, replacing Arrowhead on the current site. C, eliminate Arrowhead and redistrict its population to the other elementary schools. D, eliminate Arrowhead and move the district-wide 4th grade to Skyview Arcola. And E, eliminate Arrowhead, move the district-wide 4th grade to Skyview Arcola, and move the district-wide 8th grade to the high school. We just saw those as the kind of global, they were the options. They seem to be the global options when you get to that point. And when you look at the master plan has some monies allocated to Arrowhead, which we believed as a team were necessary, that needed to be done. But before you start committing significant monies to Arrowhead in year, say, 2020 and beyond, that conversation needs to take place. Any questions about that?
The only thing I want to point out, in your numbers overall, it does not include financing costs.
Correct.
So this is estimated build cost and soft costs related to the design, the bid, and the award of the contracts, right?
Yes, sir. Item 8 of 9, enrollment and future.
Sorry, can I catch up again? In terms of Arrowhead, this has been something which I kind of keep harping on here, and the original AEM report had made Arrowhead's roof one of their main concerns within, I think they actually called for it to be done this year. The second biggest one was the masonry repairs. Do we have concern, and I don't know, Mark, maybe you could even speak to something like this, that both of them are pushed out a minimum of 3 years if we go with this? I mean, are we comfortable with Arrowhead's roof and the masonry repairs and not doing any work on that?
So right now, any types of leaks that we incur, we bring in a contractor to take care of any leaks like we do in all our other buildings. So there's nothing right now that is something that we haven't been able to take care of where we felt that it was immediate. Right now, I'm waiting on a roof study. We actually have started it and began with high school, and our COLA sections just received it back yesterday. So from there, they'll be moving through their plan and evaluation and providing us some other insight on all roofs in the district.
Okay. I might just make the final, not to you, Mark, but I might make the final comment, I guess, to the property committee in general, that we make this a now conversation and not a then conversation. I want to make sure that we don't wind up in a situation with an Audubon where we've waited for so long that this becomes a, what are we going to do? Keep the building open? Are we going to close the building? Or what are we going to do? I would like to start this conversation now, if possible. So, thank you.
Mike took my question, but I do want to reiterate that the roof replacement of Arrowhead in 2021 is a concern for me as well. So I will second what Mike said.
Mayor, from the standpoint of it needs to be bumped up, or it's...
That it's in 2021, that it's that far out.
The only thing I would caution you on is that the roofs scheduled before that are probably in worse condition. So, you know, the bill to bite off all the roofs at once and the sequencing of that might not be practical. So we've tried to prioritize, you know, the worst case scenarios and work our way through the roofing. You know, across the district, we've got an issue with roofing.
And in terms of the issue of the school in general, we will work as fast as you direct us to in terms of providing information in order to further study that. That was important to the property committee as well. Item 8, enrollment for future consideration. Enrollment will always be a moving target based on contemporaneous economic development and demographic, et cetera, conditions. However, the two primary issues suggest the need for further attention and consideration. First, the current demographics suggest a current trend of slightly declining enrollment, and second, there's excess building capacity in the Skyview Arcola facility. So that probably necessarily should be tied to the discussion under item 7. And then lastly, Farina facilities and transportation were excluded in part. It was decided that those buildings would be shown on the plan with the values on the plan, but the values are not included in the column totals. So that's why some of the column totals have asterisks beside them. While these facilities and their maintenance are obviously vital and need to be considered, their needs, at least in year 1, should be overshadowed by educational. So
Dan, on those three then, is there any, you took some of the previous discussions around Arrowhead, for example. Is there any discussion at the property committee or recommendation from you guys related to doing something differently with those three? The bottom three that are not listed in the column totals?
we talked about them a decent amount. As you can see from the master plan, there's no values assigned to them in the first 2 years at all. So I think that's more candidly represented as they're important. The year 1 work is more important, and that should be focused on. And in conjunction with the conversation about Arrowhead, items 7 and 8, we should be discussing the other 3 facilities as well.
Yeah, I would follow up on Mike's point. I think that's certainly something that probably needs to be part of the broader discussion about property, is if there's some decisions about what to do with the transportation building, if there's other alternatives, and understand what those may be for the math, to be honest.
Before I move to the last document, any comments or questions? I hope it's clear. Oh, you know, I should have mentioned. So all of the information above the footnotes, essentially just a quick cheat sheet. You'll notice there are 4 columns for each of the items. The first column is the initial for the school. The next column are the item numbers from the feasibility assessment, from the AM assessment, and then a very brief description. And I apologize for the microscopic type font. And then the value in the last column. So that, I mean, again, the intent was to capture everything on one sheet of paper, and I hope it did that.
I'm sorry, I keep asking the questions here.
Sure.
The total report was the $100 million report that, you know, we've all seen and heard with the closure of Audubon, and I'm a little surprised, and I haven't gone through each line here, but that the total is still close to $84 million. I guess maybe to the committee themselves, did we vet through the unnecessary costs here, or did we just capture everything that wasn't Audubon?
It's everything, and one of the reasons we're still high, they have the auditorium for the high school in there, which was a big number in the out years, so we left those in at this point in time as placeholders.
Thank you.
And just a technical question, each column is headed with a year, and so these are the summers that this work is expected to be done.
Substantially, yes.
Right, so from our planning standpoint, actually, the first number would be actually fiscal year 2019, because it starts in July.
Yes.
Right, thank you.
And that's a perfect tie-in when we're done with questions to get to the next document.
The only caveat I would say is, Brenda, you'll be spending money on the planning side of the process and the bidding. So, but the bigger numbers most likely will be during the summer, unless there's a project that could go on without jeopardizing or interfering with the school and the students when the school's going on.
Okay, so moving to the 8.5 by 11 document, which is just a simple schedule. And the intent with the schedule was to kind of summarize where we are in year one, our timeline right now, and then mirror that and how that would extrapolate in taking what we just went through this year and how it would play out next year, and then using that, basically using it as a template for successive years of construction. So, I mean, I can run through this, but we have the board work session tonight is the second bullet under year one, and then hopefully the year one work will be approved at the next meeting in September. In October, we would finalize our year one design contracts for the work that would occur next year. October through February, we'd be planning the summer work essentially. February through March of next year, we would release bid packages. March and April, that would basically be our approval process, vetting out the work and bringing it to you for authorization, and then we'd start in May. Yes, Scott?
If I can just make two clarifications, I think, Dan, on the September 26th board voting session, we're really going to vote on the planning, design, and bidding cost, not the approval of the projects themselves. So those projects will be approved on a case-by-case basis at the time that the bids are received. And then I would say that on the February, March 18, we use that kind of as a placeholder, but the object is going to be to attack the bigger projects that will be really fighting for contractor resources and get those out on the street first, bid first, and award it so that we get our pick of the better contractors that deliver the work.
100%.
If I could just... If I could just suggest that if the board would turn to page 7 of 8 of this evening's agenda, while we're certainly not asking you for a vote this evening, this is what is on the agenda as the under item 14D, master plan. It's recommending that there are two motions, and I'll read them to you. Authorize administration to proceed with design and document preparation work in order to present bid responses for the board's review and consideration for $8,543,100 in year one work as presented in the master plan. The next motion would be authorize the administration as part of the design and document preparation work in year one of the master plan to enter into contracts subject to final form approval by the solicitor in the amount not to exceed $500,000.
Just with one clarifier there, that $500,000 is a subset of the $8.5 million.
Yes.
So that's a part of the overall number.
And that's pretty much it. Again, year two is essentially taking what we just went through in year one, backing it up. We state November of this year through June of next year to strategically review and modify the year two work, which would tie into the footnote at the bottom of the page, review district-wide enrollment and options, which I think capture the two items 7 and 8, that on the master plan that we discussed.
So Dan, sorry to circle back on the previous, on the year one, to focus specifically on that part, the auditorium and stage upgrade Skyview Arc Hall, can you describe that project for us, please?
Yeah, I can. I mean, essentially, we need to do extensive work on the ceiling primarily. Mark, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. So what we're looking at doing is working from the ceiling up, potentially air handlers up above here, also looking at changing the ceiling configuration, reviewing lighting, items, sound items, and basically working it up to through the roof, because the items that will be used may be a different configuration than what you see today as far as the way the design of the acoustical ceiling is, and it would necessitate a change. So the air handlers are up there are such of a large size, it wouldn't be prudent to go back after that at a later date. So we want to try to do everything that's going up here and straighten it out.
Are there any other questions from the members of the board?
I just, on the time frame of finalizing year one work design contracts in October and then begin the design process in October running till March. In the previous project that we had, we learned that spring was not a good time to be letting contracts. Couldn't the time frame for bid packages being released be a broader time frame? For example, you might do some of the design work in October and be ready to release a request for a proposal maybe in November, where we would have a bigger selection of contractors?
No, 100%. In fact, that was vigorously discussed in property committee. All of the items in year one will be aggressively designed and planned simultaneously. So to the extent that we can get things out sooner to bid, the better. However, I will tell you, we will not come back to you next year and tell you that February, March is a bad time to bid a project. We do a lot of this work, and we will have a large, competent list of bidders when we bid all of these projects. That's kind of critical to getting the best, most competitive market numbers. So I could talk to you all night about the perfect time to bid a project, and I'd like to. To answer your question, we will design. We have the architects and engineers ready, and we'd like to move forward in that phase, and we will push to get those projects to bid as quickly as possible without sacrificing quality and scope and price.
And just one other question related to that. Given the tragedies that we've had in the southern part of the country this year, do you see any potential for additional cost for contractors this year than you might have before that?
You know, that's an interesting point, because yes, prices have spiked already on raw materials. We've seen on a number of raw materials right now. But the conversation in the market is that should moderate. So actually, depending on when all these items are ready, by February, March, they may have come down. I mean, nobody can predict, and we're still not even done with hurricane season. But yeah, if we were going out to bid now, that would not be wise. It would actually be prudent to wait a few months at a minimum. We'll kind of gauge that as we get closer. But yeah, bottom line is material prices, whether you're reading about it or seeing about it, they're being felt in the trades right now.
Well, but besides the materials prices, the number of contractors that exists in the country, I think that there might be some demand that will be brought forth to the south that would cause prices to be higher here as well.
It's possible. A lot of the contractors up here are not going to be going down there. We usually find with disaster like this, utility companies might be preoccupied sort of helping out sister utility companies where the problems are. But I don't suspect that'll be as big of a problem. When the market tanked in 08 or 09, a lot of people came into the market looking for work, and some people went out of business, and that is kind of all kind of flushed out by now. But in terms of what's going on with the South right now, we'll wait and see. But I don't expect to have a problem with the number of contractors. We haven't had it yet. in our 14, 15-year history.
And I can tell you, Brenda, when we experienced other hurricanes, with my previous job, you didn't see the labor issues, the labor spike, or the shortage of labor. It was all in the materials costs.
Are there other questions from the board? Mr. Sakala, Mr. Fretz, thank you very much for your time this evening. We appreciate your input, and the board will take this under consideration for a vote next week. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Next on the agenda, I have asked Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, the agency hired by the district to provide administrative oversight for the district transportation, to present this evening. Stan Whistler, Chief Financial Officer for the IU, along with other IU staff and representatives from First Student are here. Mr. Whistler, if you would, I ask that you provide the board and the public with a status update on transportation and provide an explanation to what is clearly a number of ongoing issues. I must say that while I've witnessed a great deal of effort in transportation these past several months, I am more than frustrated with how we started the school year off. It literally appears that they're no better off than we were in last year's start. There's clearly a lack of communication from transportation to our parents, as well as to the board and myself. I strongly suggest that we begin correcting that communication here this evening, and we look forward to hearing your presentation. I do want you to know that I, as well as the board, want to know what had happened. When did it happen? When did we know things had happened? And what are we going to do in order to correct the immediate issues, as well as what are we going to do in the long term to regain the trust in our transportation services?
Thank you. I'm not going to take a lot of your time tonight, but I did want to provide an update on transportation operations, and I do ask that you allow me to provide an overview. The board members do have a PowerPoint that I printed out. I would prefer certainly to have it projected, but that wasn't going to work for tonight. But I think it will guide the conversation. Let me just start by saying, am I happy with where we are? No, not at all, and I know that you aren't as well. But I want to give you a summary of where we are, how we sort of got here, and what we're doing now, and then plans for the future. I know some of this initial material you already know, but I think it's important to sort of set the stage and give a background sort of for everybody so that we're all on the same page. First, I wanted to sort of talk about who we are, and we as two parts, sort of one, the IU, and me, and then we, the team, the transportation team for Methacton. So some of you know, obviously, that the MCIU is a local education agency, and although we have official responsibilities and a mission and a vision, I came to the IU about 12 years ago, and after having been 24 years in 5 different districts across Montgomery County, felt that the IU, in my words, should be something that added value to the districts and also made the job easier. In particular, in my case, I always felt like there were things the IU could do to make the business manager's job easier. So that's sort of, where I sort of start from. In terms of me, I feel like I have a vested interest in the success of Methacton, and I say that for at least 3 reasons. One of which is I'm a 30-year resident of Methacton. I've had 3 children who graduated from Methacton High School, and during that time probably enjoyed, or at least I enjoyed, the fact that they were transported to school over probably 17 years. Additionally, this is where I got my start. So I took a career in school business about a year out of college, and Methacton was my first job. And working here, I have to say, frankly, my wife can attest to this. After working here, I said to my wife, when we're ready to buy a house, I wanted to be in Methacton School District because I liked what I saw here working here. Background information, again, in terms of Methacton and the transportation operations. And again, some of you know this already. I've contracted with First Student at the close of the 13-14 school year. You had some transportation managers turnover, one in the fall of 2014, one in the summer 2016. In 16-17, the responsibilities were shared by your district administrators. And then in the winter of 2016, we developed the transportation team, and MCIU was added to that team in the spring of 2017. The team was assembled to provide stability and high-quality expertise to transportation operations. The second part of WE is the transportation team. So who is that? So the first part of that team is Orbit Software. They're the ones that provide the routing software. First Student is your contractor, our contractor for managing the student drivers, or managing the drivers for student transportation. First point of contact for parents. MCIU, hired to provide oversight and manage the transportation services, be a liaison between the district and the contractors, and then the district with responsibility for the budget, the fuel bid, bus aids, students with disabilities. So that's the team that was assembled. It takes time to develop a strong working team. There are a lot of pieces to the transportation puzzle. It's important that each piece or each member of the team provide and accept their responsibility because they serve a critical role. As a critical member of that team, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that things couldn't have been done better. Have we made progress? Do we have a good plan moving forward? I believe we do, and that's what I hope to relay to you this evening. Again, just by way of background, I think it's helpful to understand the magnitude of bus transportation. Your budget's about $6.8 million, 5,000 plus students, approximately 104 buses, 40 different schools that you transport to, not including non-public, charter, et cetera, approximately 90 routes. So you can see that it is a big operation and requires a lot of coordination. In terms of transportation priorities and parameters, these are things that are considered and reviewed and factored into the runs. Certainly overarching all of those is the safety of children, efficiency, using industry best practices. We had some issues with rerouting in terms of cul-de-sacs and turnarounds. Certainly we need to be aware of the hazardous routes as certified by the Department of Transportation. Length of the ride is certainly a parameter that we need to look at and did, and then put those parameters into the bus routing software and come out with the routes, which is generated by a computer program, so those routes have to be reviewed by individuals. Addressing all these issues represents a lot of change. These parameters are very similar to what other districts do, and it's important that they be established up front before you run the routes. Let me talk about four sort of elements or factors that brought us to where we are. Some of these factors exist every year, but some were very specific and unique for Methacton in 17, for the 17-18 school year. So that first factor, let's look at district-wide bus stops and routes review. So all bus stops, all bus routes were reviewed and redesigned for 17-18. That's approximately 90 different routes. Redistricting obviously was a big factor that had to be factored in. We did drive the routes twice during the summer, which sometimes creates an issue because you know that the traffic during the summer is not the same as during the school year. I can assure you that no bus roster exceeds the legal capacity. Some of the buses I know may have appeared to, but it's because of some of the other issues that we experienced that it appeared that way because they were full, but I can assure you that they were not in excess of the bus capacity according to state guidelines. We also had some issues with the time spent on the bus. That time is calculated from the time of departure from the school and arrival. That we do allow 10 minutes to unload and load the bus, so that's a factor as well. The second factor was shortage of bus drivers. This was a big deal, and it is a national problem, and in the full report that we provided, we referenced a USA Today article that appeared just a few weeks ago on August 9th that indicates that it is a national problem, that there are some districts across the country that have actually had to not have school because they didn't have a way of getting the kids there because of this shortage. Specifically to Methacton, we had 6 drivers that left as of 9/1. These were regular drivers who were signed up for regular routes, and we got indication on September 1st that for a various number of reasons were not going to be showing up for employment, and so that created a big problem. We have 89 regular runs and 83 regular drivers, which is a problem. We do have subs. However, they're subs for a reason. They don't want to work every day. And so we were able to fill in with some subs, but it did create a problem. And without the full slate of drivers, we really weren't able to implement the plan that we had devised. Because of the lack of drivers, we had to split some of the bus routes, and I alluded to the buses that were fuller than we would have liked, but not exceeding the capacity. That was because we had to split some of the routes because of lack of drivers and put those kids on other buses. Hiring drivers takes time, and it's an issue that I'll talk about in a little bit when we talk about what we need to do. But it's not something where you can just call somebody and ask them to come in and drive a bus. There's a CDL, that, as you know, licensing process that takes weeks in order to get, and also the proper endorsements on the license as well. So that was an issue. That issue also impacted our ability to communicate with parents. So that's sort of the third factor. Third element was communications. We did establish a call center, and it was staffed at the end of July. What impacted in terms of the shortage of bus drivers was the fact that in order to get drivers on the road, there are CDL drivers that are part of the dispatch team in the office who were pulled out to drive the buses, and therefore we were able to take the calls but not resolve the calls right away because the resolution is typically done by the dispatch staff that are on there. So that provided a problem for us, and again, we'll talk a little bit about what we need to do to address the shortage of bus drivers. Incoming calls in terms of the call center have been tracked and continue to be tracked. That helps us with making sure responses are given and that there are resolution to the issues, and also provides us a way to analyze trends as we look forward to minimize those calls every year. First Student also was able to call in an assistant manager to help, and so we did have that assistance, but it wasn't enough. The fourth factor is one that regardless of what you do, you probably won't get away from it, and I'll call that the normal start of year issues. So, as I said, I've been in 5 different districts as business manager. Transportation was always under my purview, and it's an issue in every district. We have monthly business managers meetings, and typically the one in September is filled with horror stories about transportation. Here's what happens. So there are many changes that happen from the prior year. So you end up with a smooth operation at the end of the year, and then all these things happen. You have people move in and move out right before or right after you've already done the routes. You have changes because of just changes in people moving around, people changing grades, and it creates, a change for parents, which is difficult sometimes to accept. And so all those normal occurrences you have, and so you will have calls, Now, I'm not going to say that we should not have had the number of calls. I just want you to understand that there are issues that arise in every school district. What we need to do is get to the point where we just have those sort of normal issues. And again, just to indicate that redistricting, was an added factor that you won't have every year, certainly. So let's talk about sort of where we are now and what we plan to do. We had issues last year. We had issues this year. I believe that it was better this year. Still not where we should be, and so we need to look at that. Change is difficult, and we made a lot of changes in a short amount of time. We have added additional contractors to handle some of the smaller runs, which has helped, and we will continue to fine-tune the routes based on input from the drivers, which will help improve the routes from now until the end of the year. Additionally, I think what we need to do is also get input from the drivers later on in the year, once they've had several months to run the routes, because as most good drivers will do, they make adjustments they need to. That information doesn't always get back, and so then you develop routes for the next year based on what's on paper. It's not necessarily what's happening. We need to get a good handle on that as well. And in terms of bus drivers, we need to sit down as a team with First Student and figure out what we can do to attract and retain more drivers. I think there are some things we can do. Again, it's a national problem, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't address it and hit it head on at the local level. And I know from talking to some of the other districts, there are some things in their contracts with First Student that are incentives in order to attract and retain drivers. So we need to do that. We need to have a cushion. I think it's unusual for 6 drivers to resign right at the start of school year. But again, you need to have those contingencies in place. We need to have those contingencies in place. In terms of a long-term plan, I will tell you that the goal is to have consistent routes with consistent drivers. So that's when you're going to limit the number of calls, and we need to get to that place. We need to get to the place where we have well-established routes. Doesn't mean there aren't going to be changes from year to year. There will. But we need to get to the place where we have consistent routes with consistent drivers, because that's the key to having a system that will run smooth. So we will continue to monitor this, continue to oversee this, and work right now to set up a plan for the 18-19 school year with significant changes to make the system work better.
Can I go first?
Thank you for the overview. Now, I'd like to go around the table and allow everybody to ask questions. So, Andrea's first, so let's go.
I was going to interrupt you in the beginning, but I figured I would wait. Back to the team. Explain to me, or we've heard this, but my biggest concern is the routes. To me, and I'm not an expert, so I could be wrong, so I want to understand Orbit's role.
So they actually have the software that generates the routes.
I know that.
So computer-generated routes.
The routes, to me, and again, I'm not an expert, but I've had children ride a bus for 7 years. The routes seem completely messed up to me. It makes no sense where you have the routes going. And I was sharing with your colleagues here, that's who I want here. And I mean, I'm all for technology, but maybe a human being needs to be more involved in this process, because these routes are wrong. These routes are wrong. And that's the bottom line. And I understand, I don't know if I don't want to argue or whatever, but I don't know about better than last year. I do think we had extra things this year, so it was hard. We thought it would, I get that, but I think the routes are the problem, and I don't see why they can't be changed. I don't think any parent or student, for that matter, would be upset if their route was changed in October. I just think it's a route issue. And I don't want to hear that it's safety or this or that, because we've been running routes and getting these kids to and from school on time in a reasonable amount of time for dozens of years. So I really want the routes looked at by a human being, please, and not next year. And I'm not going to go into specific examples, but I'm sure there are dozens of people here and people at the table. And then my only other thing, is, as an educator, you can't have kids getting to school late. Every minute counts. And so I don't want to hear, I do understand that you had a shortage of drivers and that you had some call-outs, and I get that, and it's not the driver's fault, but that happens. But I think there's an exorbitant amount of late buses, and it's not just the first week of school. So I would really like to see if it's possible. Do you think it's possible to look at these routes again? Because they don't make sense. You have kids that go to the same school, but they're at opposite ends of their sending area, and it just doesn't make sense. And you have buses going on the same road, but they're picking up different kids, but they're going to the same schools. And I know that there's logistics behind it, but we need a human being. And we need a human being.
Do you have any comments? Follow up on that?
I mean, they are adjusting the routes now. There are still some unresolved issues. We would have to take a look at what it would take to totally redo that, but we are looking at those individual issues, not through the software, but with human eyes. So.
Thank you very much. So it looks like it's approximately 10% of the drivers who stopped driving as of September. Do you perceive there is a morale problem with drivers that causes that to happen? I mean, that seems like an awful lot to leave in a particular month. Do you have a sense of that?
The reasons that were given were, family moving, new employment.
Okay, so
we have not talked to, individual drivers for their reasons for leaving, but
okay,
it's something we need to look at.
Okay. And under the shortage of bus drivers, you comment it impacted the ability to communicate with parents, and that's because you pulled the people who would have been doing the communications. Okay, and
so we were able to take the call, but then we take the call, try to resolve it through the dispatcher, and then a call back is made, but we couldn't call back right away because we didn't have the resolution to the issue. So that created a...
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily lack of people to call back, but lack of resolution with a good answer to call back.
That's correct.
Okay. I think people probably would be appreciative of a call that said, we don't have an answer yet, but we wanted you to know we're considering your concern.
Good point.
So you commented that you think it was a little bit better this year than last year, and I'm not in a position to evaluate that, but I think it would be important for us to know what the actual issues that we faced this year, a listing of them, and how we dealt with them, so that by the time we come to next year, we absolutely don't repeat any of the problems that we had this year, especially if we're able to find a good resolution to them.
That is one of the reasons the database was set up, to log the calls, and so that there is
Okay. And so I had a concern also about the substitute buses that were used. Some of them were vans, and some of them were not marked. And parents had some concerns about allowing their children to go into a vehicle that they were not expecting that would be arriving at their stop. It's something that we really need to cure before we ever do that again. I mean, if we have to do that even next month, we need to have a way of having absolute communication with parents. You know, I wouldn't put my child on, as I had it described to me, a maroon van that showed up. That doesn't sound like a school bus to me.
Delivers your blue apron, no.
We should probably consider getting some of those magnetic things that can put on.
Well, I think also communications with the parents would be very helpful, as long as they knew what to expect. Thank you very much.
Sorry, my questions will be all over the place here. Andrea started the one with Orbit software, right? So the software is the one who comes up with the routes, right? Who is doing the physical inputting of the student data into that software? The data had to get into the software somehow.
You should be at the microphone, I think.
The school's student accounting system, Power School, syncs with ClassPlus, which is Orbit software.
Folks, please.
Excuse me, everyone. I guess that leads to part of my other problem is because we heard, and the board got lots of emails about certain things, that there were students literally left off the roster. So we have a software that they're not even loaded into who weren't put on a bus, who weren't getting to school. So I see that as an issue that nobody really looked at. Nobody verified that every child who was going to school last year who would have moved up made sure that they were going to the school this year. I see that as an oversight, and no one's looking at this kind of. The next question I would have is, I guess you get to I'll work backwards here. So the board prior to last month was given a list of all the routes with all the buses with the max ride time. Okay, and it took probably myself and one other board member between 15 to 20 minutes to see there's 25% of these routes which are over the max time that this board set. How does that document even get to our level? Because in order to get to us, it had to come through the superintendent. In order for it to come through the superintendent, that report came from someone else. And then that report was generated by someone. So it made it past all of those levels of checks and balances, which is what we had all asked for and hoped for. And it still made it to us the week before school starts. I don't understand how that's possible.
I think we need to look at that. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. The comment was made that the routes were driven 2 times during the summer. Was the route driven by the assigned bus driver twice during the summer, or the route was just, it's my understanding that they only got it maybe a week or 2 before school, so did they at least run it 1 time?
Over the summer, it was not the actual driver. It was, we generated the routing and then had a handful of drivers go out and run the routes, and then the drivers themselves got the final routes before school and were asked to run.
Okay, so we were told that drivers would be able to provide feedback on the routes. Was that the case? If they noticed that there was issues on the routes, they gave feedback and those changes were made?
My understanding is yes.
Okay. For the communication factor, I'll just use a personal example here. So I received a phone call that my morning pickup time had changed. I logged on and my morning pickup time had not changed. And within minutes, I received emails and text messages from those in the public who said, hey, I just logged in to see the changes. Oh, wait, there were no changes made. What was the process during that? Do we know what started that call, or did some people's change and others didn't?
Go to the mic.
The bus portal information.
If the majority of students on a bus were affected, the entire bus would be called. If it was a single bus stop or two, the call center would handle it. So even if you did receive a call from our robocall, it was due to the fact that you were assigned to that bus. Although you might not have had at a specific time change, the number of students on that bus was such that it warranted a robocall, because that's the best use of our resources versus having 50 students or families being called by our call center.
I guess my follow-up to that would be, so I personally had no problem with my pickup time whatsoever, but I do know that a lot of the calls that I did were the ones who were complaining, were calling in to get their routes changed, and those were the ones that weren't changed. So I feel like, yes, we have a call center, but I don't know that the routes are actually being changed in a quick enough manner. I want to second what Brenda said. The special education aspect of this and the story that we heard this week is completely unacceptable to those families. They should all be... They should receive a personal phone call with an apology. These are the children who cannot handle any change to their normal routine. And this should never, and I repeat, never happen again. And I guess I'll say, I have two last ones here, and one is one which I literally spent my own time doing this. Have we fixed the problem of buses not even arriving to school on time? Okay.
I know we're still working on that.
Because this is I'm sorry, I normally try to stay pretty calm, but this is a disaster. I would watch my child get picked up in the morning, use my own personal time to drive to the school that she goes to and count how many buses arrived. And I'm not even talking about after 8:55, which I thought would probably be the target time. Arrive at about 8:55, have a chance to start school by 9:05. There were at minimum 5, 6 buses a day showing up after 9:05. You have AM kindergarten students who already have a short enough day and they can't get to school on time? And I'm sorry, I'm directing all of this at you. You are just the face of the problem of a multi-headed monster. So I'm directing this to you, but that goes to all parties involved. So I apologize. This is not directed at you as a person. So that needs to be fixed immediately. Now, I did notice on the last day of school that I checked that we were down to 3 buses who were showing up after 9:05. So maybe we're making progress, but the board needs to make sure that that's not happening at every other school. And the best part about this is that my bus driver, credit to my bus driver, on the first day of school showed up 10 minutes late. And he's apologized. And he said, I am so sorry, but I'm going to show up 10 minutes late every day. He has no idea who I am. And I just asked why. He's like, because I'm dropping off at Skyview at 8:35 and your bus stop is 8:39. So this gets to the point of the transition between the two schools are completely unrealistic. If you're going to be late for one school, you're going to be late for another school. And until this gets fixed, this is the same stuff. And I mean, like I said, credit to my bus driver, but they know it. They should immediately, that first day, I'm waiting for my route to get changed. Someone's got to tell him to change it. He can't do it himself. And I'll just get back to, and this is the overall question here, is there's got to be accountability. I've only been on this board for less than 2 years. And when I ran, transportation was a problem. Last year, transportation was a problem. This year, transportation was a problem. And we get the easy answer that's we'll do better next year. Something's got to change. You know, we used Orbitz. You know, First Student is someone who's been here this whole time. So maybe there's a discussion that needs to happen there. That's a good point about why are 6 bus drivers leaving after September 1st. I would imagine if they had any intention of leaving that they would have left or at least provided notice there. And then my question to the board, to Dr. Zerbe, and I'm sorry, Troy, you kind of walked into this halfway through. Where is the oversight? You know, Mr. Phillips, who's not here this evening, loves to tell me to get out of the weeds. Let the administration, let everyone else do the details. Stay away from the details. Who else is going to do it at this point? Who is going to stop and see the information that's being presented to us before it gets to the board? We sit here and we have huge audiences of people. This could have all been stopped. If that report had just gotten to us a couple weeks earlier, we could have brought it up. But that should never get to us as a board. I'm sorry, it should not. So, again, my apologies to you. I'm not taking this out on you. It's just the frustration level that is just beyond. So, thank you.
I hope you wore your Kevlar tonight. You know, listen, there's no other way to describe it. It's horrendous. You know, it's just a very poor performance across the board, and there's accountability at the district, there's accountability with the MCIU, there's accountability with Orbitz, First Student, et cetera. And it seems to be the same old story, and I'm not hearing the same stories, whether it's in-house transportation or outsourced transportation across other school districts. Maybe that problem's there, but you know, when I check, I'm not hearing the consistency of the problems that we seem to experience as a school district. I guess one of the biggest things I was concerned about, and this didn't happen till September 1st, I guess, is the shortage of drivers. Obviously, we all see the press that that's an issue nationally and regionally. However, if that's an issue, First Student, and I know you're not First Student, Stan, but they need to have a process to have a stable of drivers, not just for our district, but for the other districts in the area that they serve. I'm not sure how that stable of temporary drivers can be allocated. I'm not sure, you know, as you enter in a school year, should you have 115% of your drivers, or should you have 105%? But obviously, the formula that we're using isn't working. I was disappointed not to hear that we were short drivers before the first day of school. If these retirements happened September 1st, I would have expected that we as a board, through the administration, would have been advised, and perhaps, Dave, you were, I don't know, would have been advised that we got a real issue because we just dropped 10% of our drivers. But I heard nothing about that. So, you know, massive issue from our perspective. There seems to be just the lack of ability to kind of pressure test the system, the routes correctly. And whether it's, you know, the drive times you need to add 10% to when you do them in the summer and kind of make those a set of parameters, you know, there's got to be some better formula to work through these issues. You know, listen, as you looked at the factors, they're all factors. You're going to have factors every year. But we knew about the redistricting early enough. It was prior to when bus routes were being done. You know, the bus routes and the timing, as Mr. Ryan said, you know, it's just inexcusable that you have drop-offs happening and then that same bus needs to be somewhere else at picking up another route for another school, and somebody doesn't flag that. It's just, software is supposed to flag those inconsistencies, and I don't know whether we have the right flags built into the system from a parameters perspective. But it's obvious to me that, we don't have, the safeguards that you can put in. Whether the system doesn't have that capability or not, I have no idea from a technology perspective. It would surprise me if they didn't. I guess, a general question that we have to answer is, how do we attract and retain drivers? If we're having excessive turnover, and I know turnover happens everywhere, somebody's going to go somewhere for 50 cents an hour more, or $1 an hour, whatever the differentials are. But I think we ought to understand how you attract and retain drivers, and we need to think about being kind of on the front edge of that so that we're not leaking drivers to other school districts, because I would imagine you get into a talent war where somebody is looking for drivers and willing to pay a little bit more. We need to understand that. I don't know whether there's a retention number that needs to be built in there that covers us for the first month or something, and you've got, or 60 days or 90 days, and if you're not there for that amount of time, you forego it. I'm not sure. The professionals that run these kinds of things have to have ideas around retention of talent across the board. I guess my final question is, how many drivers are we currently short for route drivers, let alone for, kind of the surplus that we're supposed to have?
I think the numbers.
We're 11 down still, so we've not filled anything and we lost one more. And what's the game plan? Do we have any drivers in the process of being hired or certified, or what's the outlook? Because I got to think we're going to continue to have problems if we've got 10% of our drivers, that are temporary.
There's currently 10 people in the system to be trained, but the training it's 6 weeks just to be able to test for your CDL and your S and your P, and then first student puts them into other training for their school bus driver training. I mean, you don't want to pick Mr. Pepsi truck off the street and put him on a school bus.
No, I don't disagree with you there, but what percentage of those 10 had CDLs already?
2.
So to me, a gap is you got to be attracting people that have the CDLs already.
I can tell you that we've been contacted as CIU with many first student districts in Montgomery County. They're all short.
Is it just for student, or is it other busing companies as well?
The biggest one in this area.
So Dave, I just got to say, we got to get first student in here, and they need to be called on the rug with some accountability on this, especially if it appears to be a district-wide issue, not just with us, but with other schools and their ability to attract and retain talent.
Yeah, there's actually provisions in our agreement with them for them to produce the drivers needed for the routes, and I know that our business manager has been documenting all the issues associated with that to manage the contract going forward. So there are some financial penalties to that, and while that is something we're taking care of, this challenge still is getting the drivers, and that's aside from managing that contract, putting the pressure on for a student to, produce the drivers is one part of that.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about the financial penalty. I'm more concerned about filling jobs.
No, I agree, and that's part of their responsibility within their contract to make sure that they're producing the drivers necessary for the runs that are needed for the district. So, I think in listening to what was being presented this evening, I think I got to say, it sounds like we're taking some of the routes and giving them to other vendors who happen to have drivers that can then supplant what we're short, and then we're moving those drivers that were using those routes to some of the larger buses. Is that what I'm hearing? All right. I mean, that's a temporary adjustment, but certainly not the one that we can count on long term. I think you hit it on the head when you said, I don't think our threshold is at the proper level. We should be, instead of trying to look for 10 drivers, we should be looking at 30. Or some number that well exceeds what we would need on a regular basis, because it was recently shared with me, but not only are we 10 or 11 down, there are days, as you might imagine, people call off, they're sick or whatever they are. So now that exasperates the problem even further.
Yeah, I mean, it's the number of drivers plus the, extra drivers that they're supposed to have on staff. That's the big issue. So, I mean, somebody's got to kind of do some math around it. Most of it seems like kind of math and understanding, talent. You got to attract the talent, you got to retain the talent as well. I mean, we can't stop people from retiring if that's truly what they do, but we need to kind of work through that.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to apologize personally to all the families that have been affected by this. I've lost count of the number of emails I've received. I've lost count of the number of phone calls I made to individual families. And there aren't consistent stories that I'm seeing. Everything you've covered here is an issue I've seen from many, many families who have reached out to me and more. The idea of stopping a van that is not identified as a bus on a major road, such as Egypt Road, to try to offload kids or unload kids as people don't recognize it as a school bus service and just zip by them, either go around them or come at them directly on, is inexcusable. So I'm surprised that we even sent a transportation bus out like that. The idea that there's a bus shortage is not a new idea. That we were never informed of is an issue. You mentioned that it's a national issue. That's been that way. But the prep has not been there to support us. So are you saying for every school district that you support that uses First Student, they're all experiencing these same type of issues?
Even districts that are self-op are experiencing the same.
Districts that have their own drivers are?
Yes.
Okay. I, like many other people, commute to work. We drive our cars to work, and we always look forward to schools being out. It reduces our drive time. It's always been that way and always be that way. So the idea of driving bus routes in the summer and how you can actually gauge that, it appears that there's a big flaw in that, because we should not have bus routes that run on a regular basis above the parameters we set. We shouldn't find out in August in prep for a board meeting, or September, whichever month it was, I'm losing track of the months now, we get a list of buses, routes that exceed that limit, as if that was okay to even produce that list and send it over to the school. Because that's one of the simplest parameters that these type of services should be able to measure. It's not complicated science, it's how long's the bus route lasting. Also, until the beginning of school, when everything fell apart, we were not exposed to any risk. Everything was roses, everything was fine. That's what was communicated to us. I checked in with Dr. Zerbe on a regular basis, and he was getting just as rosy about it as the presentations here. We all feel like we were duped, to be quite honest, and we don't feel like you're anywhere near being able to answer what's going on in terms of a strategy on how to reduce these on a weekly basis. We've had, as Mr. Ryan said, several years prior to this where transportation has not gone well. So when I hear things about we're doubling staff in our call center, we're we're taking these actions, I don't think there was any preparation of prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Because a lot of the parameters that are causing all these that you summarize here and more are things that should be of top of mind for the whole organization. You know, back to the families I talked to, you know, we have families who are in the special services that Dr. Angstead and other people are continuously all day long trying to provide them additional services to make their experience at school better, help the families deal with their life and everything. And we have many, many people involved. And the very simplest thing we can do for them in their daily routine is get the bus to them on time when we say it will, drop them off on time and say it will, just to keep that stability and consistency in their daily lives. Because when that gets out of whack, that ruins the whole day. And I don't care how brilliant of teachers or additional staff we have here, we just made their whole days worse, and more tragically, we made that child's whole day worse by the simple fact of we can't even get the time for these students. I have to be honest with you. For the last month, I've been angry, I've been sad, I've been disappointed, and every other emotion as I've gotten the emails from the families and communicated with them. And I feel that none of this was exposed to us over the summer. We tried to start early in the year and identify the routes and work through this. And based on the presentation tonight, I don't have a clear understanding of why. Why did these things happen? Whose responsibility was that? You know, everything ultimately rolls up to Dr. Zerbe and then to the board. And, you know, at a high level, sure, we take responsibility for everything that goes on in the school district, but that's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about all these processes, and granted, doing all the routes, doing all the stops and everything are involved processes, I'll give you that. But that's why we're paying $6.8 million, because we're entrusting that to people that we think are very knowledgeable people that can handle that, mitigate the risk ahead of time, and provide a very good service. And we'll need to think how best to approach this in the future. I don't have any specific questions for you. I just really came here tonight to share with you everything I personally have been going through and trying to help our families. And I've been making phone calls to the transportation team and everywhere trying to help out families on any given day of the week. And I really don't think that should ever happen. I don't think we should have the magnitude of issues and frustrations we have this year and in past years. And I fully expect that at next month's work session, we have another meeting like this, and I expect to have the answers to the whys, not the high levels.
So my questions and statements are probably going to be all over the place because a lot of my colleagues up here at the board have asked some questions that have been top of my mind as well. I'm having a terrible sense of deja vu right now because I feel like we have been here before, and all of this was preventable. We've spent several months now being presented information about transportation and being given every assurance that things were on track. We all asked the questions, we all knew what the problems were, and we were assured that these things were being addressed. And frankly, I feel like I've been lied to. And I think that the families in our community are feeling like they've been lied to as well. We were told this wasn't going to happen, and it did. The issue with Orbit software, I understand it syncs with PowerSchool, and that created some problems with data gaps. But who put the information into the software for the parameters where we had buses that were scheduled to bring students home at times that were prior to school dismissal? Who was responsible for inputting that data?
Orbit software.
So someone from Orbit is putting the data in and put it in incorrectly. Is that same person the person that is responsible for setting the parameters for the length of a route?
I mean, that's based on, our approach to the parameters that need to go in there.
So who is physically sitting at a computer and typing in this information? That's what I want to know.
That's Orbit Software's responsibility.
Okay, and who was it that communicated this information to Orbit? Is that where the breakdown occurred? Because if school is dismissed at 3:35 and you have a student scheduled to arrive home at 3:34, someone should have caught that. Someone should have seen that. And to Andrea's point of having a human being involved, yes, that would have caught it, but somebody should have known before it was even typed into the computer. So that's something that I think that we all need to be informed about. We were given the routes on August 24th and identified very quickly, as Mr. Ryan said, that many of these routes were beyond the length of a ride time that any of us at the board were comfortable with. Did we put those parameters into the system? Were those accurately captured? That we wanted no student on the bus whenever possible for more than 50 minutes?
Yes.
So where did the flaw happen? Where did the problem occur that we had? I apologize, my calculations last month were even worse. I thought it was about a quarter. No, it was closer to a third of those routes were over 50 minutes. How did that happen?
I don't have an answer for that.
I'd like to have an answer for our next meeting. Some of these contributing factors that you've given to us were the same answers that we were given a year ago when we asked about what was going on with our transportation and why we were having the problems. I specifically remember asking this year about a shortage of drivers. The question was asked and answered that there was no shortage. And here we are finding out that we're down 11 drivers this far into the school year. I'm questioning what you mean when you say that no bus roster exceed the legal capacity. What does it mean that they only appear too full?
Just because they're full, but it's not exceeding the capacity for that bus.
So this is capacity determined by the DOT?
Correct.
Okay, and we're not exceeding that capacity on any of these?
Correct.
Okay. How has the shortage of bus drivers led to an impact our ability to communicate with parents? Is it just because we've had to bring people out of the dispatch area?
Yes.
Are bus drivers not communicating problems from the road back to the dispatch center? Are we having issues where they're not reporting delays or problems along the route?
We have corrected that issue.
So it was a problem?
It was an issue, yes.
Okay, and that's been addressed. Listing the normal start of year issues as a factor, to me, that's not a factor. Because if all we had were these issues with some redistricting and the changes from the prior year and the normal school year, the beginning of the year delays, we would not be sitting here having this conversation right now. So to me, that shouldn't even be part of this presentation. Have we reached out to other companies such as METS or STA to see if they can help us to supplement?
Yes.
Okay, and have we had success with that?
That's where some of this roll.
We tried to put some of the non-public runs with STA, and they have nothing for us. They have no resources for us whatsoever. METS is, like I said, everybody's scrambling right now, district-wide. There are no available drivers out there.
Okay. So my final request, I hate to get this involved in the detailed inner workings of a system of our district. That's not my job as a member of the board of directors. But my trust in this system is gone at this point. So what I would like us to receive is a list of all of the bus numbers, a list of the route that the bus is driving, a head count for that bus and the capacity for that specific vehicle, the time of the first stop, and the time of the last stop. And I want that information to us before the next work session so that we can see where the problems still exist. Because clearly someone somewhere is not doing that job, and so it's become our responsibility to take care of that.
I'm not going to try to repeat a lot of what's been asked, and I'll actually address a lot of this to Dr. Zerbe and not to Stanley. We talked about processes and parameters. We hired somebody to document our processes and our parameters, and then we talk about our processes not working. I sat here in February and reluctantly voted to close a school with the assurances that all that stuff that happened last year, we could get it done in the shortest period. We were voting on that in February. It was a short period. I distinctly asked, can we get this done without screwing up related to redistricting? And I see redistricting as a reason. I have specifically asked related to root causes of whys. Why? You go 6 whys, you should be able to have root causes. I don't see root causes. I find out what happened, but I don't know the root causes, so I have no confidence whatsoever that the root causes won't be repeated. The comment that we need to look at it, Stanley, I understand. We need to look at it. Unacceptable at this point in time to be giving that as a response. Finally, I would say I'm really concerned because the safety of the children is okay. No bus roster exceeds legal capacity, but it looks like there's too many kids on the bus. Somebody tells me I can't find a seat on the bus. What is the legal capacity? And I do actually have one distinct question, and I'll get off my soapbox here. The first student, my understanding, when we went to first student and as a district chose to do that, we were told many things about their ability to do things. And one of the things I remember, and I even remember in the last year and a half sitting up here, is the right sizing of the bus. There should be enough flexibility in first students' inventory of buses that we don't have to look like we don't have enough capacity on the bus. Is there a breakdown in the contract with first student or whoever is responsible for setting those bus sizes, at least, at the very least, if we're going to be 5 buses late, 10 minutes late to Woodland, at least there's enough seats for the kids that are in there. Can you answer that one, please?
I mean, it was an issue in the beginning of the year because of the lack of drivers, and so we had to split some of the runs and put them on buses that they normally would not have been on. So when we're fully staffed with bus drivers, it won't be an issue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm wrapping everything up here. Much of my colleagues on the board have gone through a lot of the things that I've had questions on. I've been on this board almost 8 years, and this is the worst I've ever seen this. Back in the day, quote unquote, if there were 2 or 3 issues that were brought to the board regarding a transportation issue, that was a lot. Multiply that times 100, and here we are today. Seems to me that the problem, back when first student came on board with us, that first year things went pretty okay. There were a little bit of issues. We had some pickup problems and things like that, but we didn't have the problems that we have to the extent today. It seems to me that a compounding of problems and issues and transitions has caused a complete total breakdown of the system. With the loss of the changing of transportation directors, with the movement to first student without a transportation director, the bringing in of a consultant to evaluate and redo our routes, that heightened the problem. That started the cascade failure of where we are now. And now, this. The Power School program has faults. That should have been a major consideration when downloading that data. into the Bus Boss program so far. I understand that not everybody knew that Power School had problems, but they were there. I was told that the drivers would go through all their routes before school started. Did each driver go through their routes and drive them prior to the start of school?
Yes, they did.
They did.
It's actually part of the contract.
Exactly. So why did they have problems then on the first day of school? Because we had 10 drivers not show up. Was that it? So those 10 routes were substituted or split right off the bat.
Right. That certainly was a big problem.
And that was probably the catalyst that started the cascade failure of all the other routes. Right?
Correct.
Not to mention the bad data that we had with some kids not even being on the routes in the first place. Communications. Brenda and Michael alluded to this. Perhaps there is no more frustrating part than waiting for your kids to be picked up and bus never shows up. Or getting a phone call with a message by a robocall saying your bus stop has been changed to such and such time and such time. So we log on to find out it has not been changed, as it was in my household. It's a good thing we decided to do that too, because if we hadn't, my kids would have missed their bus. While trying to fix a route, the priority of communications is number one. You've got families out there with a bad taste in their mouth from last year. Here we are this year, and now we're sending out false data and bad robocalls. Perhaps we need to change the message, saying your route might be affected due to something else because of your student or something like that. Please report to the bus portal and check your number to see if there's a change in your bus pickup time. Not to give an arbitrary time, like in my case, only to find out and then create confusion. The contractors. Who hired these private contractors?
They're contractors that the IU works with.
Who pays for them? Did the Methacton School District pay for these independent contractors?
I can answer that. If first students, under the first student contract, if we have to substitute any other driver or company to fulfill what their requirements are, that is deducted from first student as part of the monthly bills, and with an additional fee added on top of that.
Well, that all may be well and good, but quite frankly, if a van had pulled up to my house to pick up my kids unmarked, guess what would have happened? I would have driven them to school, and then I would have driven over to Farina and asked him what the HE double hockey sticks is going on here. And it's either going to be me or my wife, and you don't want my wife doing that. Trust me. And it's unfortunately not funny. How many of you really, really, really wanted that to happen? None. No excuse for an unmarked vehicle picking up kids on a highway, on a road, in a neighborhood. It doesn't matter. Ride times. Enough said on that. It's disgraceful. Special ed students. Unbelievable. Late buses to school. What good is having the kids there? I mean, without them, teachers have nothing to do. Can't teach when the kids are still sitting on a bus. How about this? The early buses. The buses stacked up in front of the high school at 7 a.m., waiting to get off, waiting to be unloaded. Both my kids are sitting at school, 6:59. My son texts me, "Dad, we're here already. I guess I'll just listen to my music for the next 15 or 20 minutes because we're not allowed off the bus until quarter after." So he has to get on the bus at 6:25 a.m. to drive 10 minutes from Bustard Road to the high school and sit on the bus for 45 minutes. from that time frame. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Bus boss should solve that problem. Okay? Oversight, accountability. I want an answer on that by the next board meeting. Preventability. How can this not happen again? I firmly think there is no way to prevent this from happening again. You know why? Because there are too many cooks in the kitchen. There's too many things to go on. There's too many variables. When we had our transportation director here, Terry Turley, some of you out there know him, remember him. He had his problems, unfortunately, and he's no longer working for the district. But you know what? He knew transportation. He knew bus routes. He knew how to do the job. No one can disargue that. I had problems when my kid was in 4th grade at Worcester. Guess what? Fixed next day. No problems ever after that. I think the school district is doing its students, parents, teachers a very, very bad disservice by not having a transportation director. You know, in light of all that's going on in the district, and we got problems, but we're going to work on them and we're going to solve them, every one of them. This one is a biggie. Because if we can't get the kids to the school, then what's the point? So, you know, I'm not going to go into it tonight because it's not the time. We've spent enough time on this topic right now. I think you got the message. You got the point. But we need to do something. As a board, we need to give some direction to our administration. If we have to dig under rocks and stones to find money to do this correctly, let's fix it. Take $6 billion. You know, come on. We saved money by consolidating going to first student, but we had a transportation director when we did that. The plan was to have somebody here, an owner's rep. Okay? We were trying other ways. I don't see them working. Thank you.
I know we spent a lot of time, but I just wanted to mention 2 things quickly. I work for a district that does 2 things well. They do facilities well, and they do transportation well. And they have about 7,000 plus students. I haven't had one child come to my class late. I have had them late home, I will say that. There is a shortage of drivers, and there's always kids in my room till 4 o'clock. But they haven't been late. So we can, and they have never owned their buses. They've outsourced the existence of the school district. So, and they do have somebody in-house, like Mr. Roth was saying. So it's something to kind of, I'm sure you all do talk, but that would be worth it because they they have beautiful roofs and they do get the kids on. And I wanted to go back to the first week of school. We have kind of a saying in education, especially K to 8, our job is to get them to school, feed them, make sure they get home, and we feel like we had a successful first day. And I would really like to see that next year.
I'm sorry,
I'm saying the first day.
We'd like to see that right now.
No, that's not what I meant.
Okay.
I meant we were all saying, oh, the first week of school.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. What I meant is that first day, it's possible because that's, of course, we want them happy and to have a good day. But the saying is, get them here, feed them, get them home. Yay. And we have not been able to do that yet.
So if I could just say a few things. First of all, members of the board, I want to tell you I appreciate and I apologize for you having to deal with this issue. Secondly, I've documented to the best of my ability the comments that you have made and the requests that you have made as a need for additional information to the whys and the specifics and the reports that we need to have coming forward to you. I think the most important thing right now, and certainly I think there's a longer term challenge for us, and that might, take some additional discussion here at this table, certainly discussion with my cabinet and my administration. But I think there's nothing more important right now, based on the current, situation that we're in, that we double down and we get our students to school on time in a safe manner. There's enough of the excuses. We need to do what's got to get done in order to get our kids to school and get them home. So ask you, get together with the team, let's get this thing taken care of. I'd expect you to come back next month, and I'll share my documentation with you so that the team can prepare not only over the next coming days to correct the issues, but also to report back to this board and to myself about the questions that they have, as well as how we're going to move forward in the future. I appreciate your time this evening. We got to get this taken care of. There's no more time for excuses. I can't have this conversation any longer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, you'll see that for September 26th, right now there are scheduled academic recognition awards for the high school. Dr. Sorgini will be here to present those. The National Association of Music Merchants presentation will occur, and check presentations from the Meth Acton Education Foundation. In addition, there'll be public comment on board action items and the appointment of new student board representatives. If you flip over on the agenda, there'll be an administrative oath of office for those student board representatives. There will be reports from the various chairpersons of the following committees: Finance, Property, Education, Policy, Intermediate Unit, North Monco Votech, Student Board Representatives, Communications, my office, and any other advisements. The board meeting minutes will be approved, and then we're on to fiscal items. This evening, Mr. Bricker, our Director of Finance is here. We have 3 items on the agenda: list of bills, treasurer's report, and this is a most recent item. It probably did not make the original posting 72 hours in advance of this meeting. Since it's not a voting meeting, it does give you and the public time to look at this particular item, and I'll just explain it, and then Mr. Bricker can go back over the list of bills and treasurer's report. Under the payment of Mill Road, this was a topic of conversation with the Property Committee for a number of months. Worcester Township had determined that they were going to pave certain roads within their municipality. They chose to pave Kriebel Mill and Mill Road. In doing so, after an evaluation of Mill Road, they determined that approximately 145 yards thereabout was needed to be paved, rebased, I guess it's called, and it was due to the construction vehicles entering our campus at the high school, as well as a lot of other wear and tear over time. The Property Committee, in my opinion, did an excellent job in helping us evaluate that issue, and we engaged Fidavia to meet with the township to do the inspection necessary to substantiate the fact that, yes, the construction and repair was required, and it was due to the work on the fields. So here in front of you for your approval next week is to approve payment to Worcester Township for the repair of 145 yards of paving base on Mill Road in the amount of $4,060. Mr. Bricker, list of bills and treasurer's report.
I have the list of bills and the treasurer's report for your review, and any questions that you may have on them. That'll be up for approval next week.
Any questions from the members of the board? If not, thank you, Mr. Bricker. Next on the agenda, personnel items, Dr. Sosnovic.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. For board's consideration next week, we have 1 resignation classified, 8 employment classified, 1 change of status of a professional, 1 uncompensated leave. I believe you were going to make a note on this particular item.
I'm sorry. Under uncompensated leave classified, it reads, approve the request for uncompensated leave for the absence of Ellen Martin, instructional assistant at Eagleville Elementary School. It is unfortunate for me to mention here this evening that we were informed earlier this week that Ellen Martin, an instructional assistant at Eagleville, also was an instructional assistant at Audubon and Woodland, lost a hard battle with cancer on Sunday. And so if we could just take a moment of silence, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Proceed, Dr. Sosnovic.
Also for your consideration for supplemental contracts with the list of department area coordinators as attached. We will have 6 community education items for you to approve. I would like to bring to the board's attention, item 4 is a retroactive item. We'd like to bring this to the board's attention. Due to an oversight, this person was missed being on a previous board agenda. That is the cause for the retroactivity. And also, as I missed just prior, the list of volunteers. And that is it.
Are there any questions from members of the board?
Just one, Troy, for item B, classified, should be January 18th, 2018, not 2017. Resignations classified. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just make a mention. The board president just said, did you know Donna was retiring? Yeah, I put the agenda together. I'd like to make an announcement. Donna Coons, superintendent secretary from a little more than 18 years, is following in her husband's footsteps, who retired just about a year ago. And she's delivered her resignation effective sometime in January, as listed here. So that also means that we'll have a new board secretary at some point in the near future. Any other questions on personnel items? If not, we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, for curriculum, we have, we'll be seeking approval for science curriculum attached. There are 4 environmental science courses and 3 biology courses, and we'll also have notification regarding a science textbook that we are looking to purchase for grade 6 this year. This would be after next week's board meeting. We will have information on the website regarding how we'll go about reviewing that, since it is a technology book.
Any questions for Dr. Katona? If not, we'll move on to the next item, 13, to be policy. On the agenda for the 26th will be no second reading items, so there'll be nothing for you to approve under policy. However, there are 9 policies that are listed under first reading, and they include field trips, bullying, cyberbullying, payment of bills, disposal of property, emergency preparedness, relations with law enforcement, opening exercises in the flag, free reduced meals, and bonding. If there are any questions on any of those, yeah, there is. Okay.
Yes, on payment of bills. With the revised policy, will that change practice within the finance department at all?
You'd have to go through a complete... Yeah.
Okay.
I went through the policy, and there will be some certain changes with controls based on the staffing and people returning from that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on matters of policy? as listed? If not, we'll move on to the next item, item 14. Under Other, Gifts, Donations, and Sponsorships. There are 5 of those listed here. Accept a sponsorship from AmeriGas for the amount of $500 for the Methacton Marching Band effective August 31st, 2018. Accept a sponsorship from Tosco Pizza in the amount of $500 as a trailer sponsor for the Methacton Marching Band as well, August 31st. Accept the gift of $2,900 from the Methacton Education Foundation to fulfillment of an autistic support program at Arcola and Skyview Upper Elementary School. Accept the gift of $10,081.35 from Methacton Education Foundation for the backpack program district-wide. And accept $100 from Donald and Susan Sawyer for the backpack program at Methacton High School. Are there any questions on any of those items?
Not a question. I just want to say thank you again to all the work that the Methacton Education Foundation does and for all the contributions that they make outside of what we as a board can improve. They do a fantastic job for this community. Thank you.
Well said. Item B, under trips, approve the participation of Arcola Intermediate School in the main exchange program, and your paper may reflect a date of 2016-17. That was corrected earlier this afternoon. It should read 17-18 at a cost to the district of $2,178 for 3 substitutes for 5 days. The second trip is approve the trip from Methacton High School indoor drumline to Dayton, Ohio for World Championships April 18th, 2018 through the 22nd. At a cost to the district of $500 registration fee and $435.60 for 1 substitute for 3 days. Any questions on the trips as listed? If not, under traffic study, item C, approve the McMahon Associates of Fort Washington, PA to conduct a traffic study on the Skyview Arcola campus and to complete the second phase of traffic study at the high school campus at a cost not to exceed $10,250. Any questions on the traffic study? Yep.
Just a real quick one on that traffic study. Will that study be, and it says at the high school campus, but will that also be looking at the impact of the intersection at Germantown Pike and Cleveland Road in front? Because the backups there sometimes are incredible.
If I could, Mr. Fretz, would you mind answering that for us, please?
Yes, it will. It will look at that as part of that study.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Also, Mark, is I think, in my opinion, is that the consideration of the buses not being owned by the school district, we should consider what we would want to do with the transportation, building it itself. So I don't know if that's part of the study, if that would be considered in the evaluation of the need for parking, et cetera. But at the same time, it's an interesting one. I'll have to think about how I vote on this one next week. Thanks.
Any other questions on this matter? If not, we'll go on to the master plan. Again, I spoke about this earlier when Mr. Sakala spoke on the master plan. Are there any other questions on item D? If not, we'll move on to dates for board members' calendars. Mr. Boardman, do you want to take the rest of the agenda, please?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Next week, we have the board meeting. The following week, October 2nd, we have the Education Committee meeting. And the 4th of October, we have the Policy Committee meeting. The 9th, we have the Property Committee meeting. The 11th, we have the Finance Committee meeting. And then we'll have the October board work session. And we'll have the October 24th board meeting. And then we'll have old business, and then under new business, we'll be having approve the candidate, these candidates as the president-elect for 1 year for PSBA, approve candidates as vice president for 1-year term, and approve candidate for treasurer for a 3-year term, and approve candidate as the PSBA insurance trustee for a term ending in 2020. And then approve a candidate, Marianne L. Neal, as the PSBA Insurance Trust trustee for a term ending in 2020. That's it for new business.
Excuse me, Mr. Boardman. For these officer candidates, do we have any information on their backgrounds as to why, in the case of the first line, there are 2 people and we would elect 1, right? Would be helpful to have some information on them.
Ms. Coons will be sharing that with you this week.
And just a point of order question, this might be to, I guess, Kyle here. When there is an either-or vote, how exactly will that work? Does one board member have to nominate the person who they would want, and then you calculate the votes off of that? Or is there how many vote for this person and how many vote for that person?
Correct. The best way to do it would be to take nominations, for example, for the president-elect, any names that wish to be nominated. If it's certainly possible, if there is unanimous support, for example, Mr. Hutchinson, only Mr. Hutchinson might be nominated for that particular position, and no other nominations might be taken. If there are 2 names nominated, then we would take go down the list of the board members, and each board member would indicate who they vote for, and we would see who gets the most votes after that vote is taken. You're welcome.
So, wanted to give an update on contract negotiations. As we move into the public comment portion of the evening, I would personally like to acknowledge the strain and frustration that this negotiation and impasse has created for all our members of our community, most particularly those of us in the room in this session. Tensions have been inflamed, and I would like to take this opportunity to offer a possible solution that has the potential to bring about a swift and positive resolution. Recognizing the issues that separate the board and the teachers union and the lack of immediately likelihood of a resolution, the board would like to invite the Methacton Education Association to return to work and proceed to the final best offer arbitration on issue-by-issue basis. Final best offer arbitration would be mandated if the teachers union were to strike the maximum amount of time allowable under Pennsylvania law. In the final best offer arbitration, both sides submit their final best offers after vetting them with the public to an arbitration panel consisting of 3 members, 1 selected by the union, 1 chosen by the board, and a 3rd selected from a list provided by the American Arbitration Association. These offers, complete with supporting documentation and rationales, must be submitted within 10 days of the initiation of the process. The public will have the opportunity to comment on these offers, and public feedback will be shared with the arbitration panel. Then, the arbitration panel will hold a series of hearings to listen to the perspectives from the board and the union in support of their offers. The arbitrators will then have 20 days to issue a decision, but the panel controls when the hearing is completed. The arbitrator's decision will be final and binding unless the union or the board rejects the findings within 10 days of issuance. If the MEA accepts this invitation, the strike will end and classes will resume as soon as administratively possible. I'm hopeful that this form of arbitration, which also engages the public in the process, will bring us closer to a resolution. Our invitation returns students to classes and provides the perspectives of 3 distinct arbitration panel members. It's a win-win for everyone. I'm hopeful that after considering this option, the MEA will engage with us in a positive step forward to return the students to the classroom and finalize a fair contract. And thank you. That's my update for now.
Sell it yourself. Not going to happen.
We're about to commence with the courtesy of the floor section. Since there may be a number of individuals who this may be their first time attending a board meeting, just wanted to, or making comment, wanted to make a few observations or point out a few items. One is under the Pennsylvania Sunshine Act. Any speaker addressing the board does need to provide their name, address, and if applicable, group affiliation. So please, if you do come up to speak when you step to the podium, just provide your name and address up front. Pursuant to Board Policy 903, public comment is limited to 3 minutes. If you're getting close to the end of the 3-minute period, you'll be requested to wrap up, and we request that in order to allow time for everyone else who might want to speak, that you do conclude your comments at the end of the 3-minute period. And finally, the purpose of the courtesy of the floor section of the meeting is to provide, obviously, comments and feedback to the board. The board's practice is to provide written responses to questions that are presented during the courtesy of the floor section in writing. It's also possible, if individual board members wish to respond, they may do so at the conclusion of the courtesy of the floor section. Thank you.
Anybody want to speak courtesy of the floor?
It looks like it works. Matt Bogard, Lower Providence. I'm speaking as a parent, and I'm actually speaking about the transportation issue because I actually I had concerns about that previously, and today's discussion did not alleviate any of those concerns. So my first point, I think, is I believe Stan mentioned that he believed it was better this year. And I found that comment pretty disturbing because there was no data to back up his statement, right? He said it feels better this year. So that started me off a little bit uneasy about his ability to solve some of these issues. So really, I want to know, what are the numbers? How many students are on the bus greater than 50 minutes? How often are the buses late? We have GPS, I think Troy mentioned, we have GPS on all of our buses. We should know how long the buses are en route, when they arrive. We have technology, it should be relatively simple. I had questions. He mentioned the bus routes were driven twice during the summer. At one point he mentioned the bus drivers drove them. At another point he mentioned that, I guess, administrators at First Student drove them. My question are, was there acceptance criteria for driving these routes? How do they know whether they were successful in driving them, or was the only successful criteria that they completed the routes at all? Next, he mentioned that they have an incoming call center. He mentioned that they track on complaints. I spoke to a very nice woman at the call center, and she mentioned they had paper log. Didn't sound like they actually had an electronic log to track it. So I just wanted to know, how do they track these trends and what actions do they take? Related to that, he mentioned that they're going to later collect feedback from bus drivers. I think at that point it's probably too late. At work, we talk a lot of times about work as imagined versus work as done. And it seemed like there's a lot of work as imagined being discussed during his presentation, rather than how the work's actually being done. And the bus drivers are probably the experts on how the work's actually being done. So I'd like to see, what's their feedback? How is he collected every day? What lessons do they learn, right? I mean, we're an educational institution. We should be looking to learn every day and take our learnings to improve. Next, I think he mentioned that his fourth root cause was that it was the start of school. I think, as Paul mentioned, that's not a root cause, right? That's just something that happens. Every year we have a first start of school. And I think I mentioned to Troy when I talked to him, wouldn't it be nice if the first week of school you don't spend hours talking to parents, right? This isn't a surprise. Every year students start school. So every year we should have a process, right? It appears there's no process at all that builds on how do we get children to school? How do we develop the routes? How do we test those routes? When do the principals and the teachers need to get their student list so they can have the right number of safeties?
Can you finish up, Matt, please?
Yep, and that's it. And then the final thing is, I think we just need to know, like with the communication, right? The robocalls, right? It's really simple. Explain what they are, and then also get the communication from the bus drivers.
Thank you.
Melissa Vox, Worcester. It's my first school board meeting. I'm a public servant and also a union member. More importantly, I'm a mom. My son transferred to Methacton this month, despite the fact that his father still lives in North Penn. We chose Methacton. Being new to the district, I do not know the history, and I've been told by other parents that there is definitely a history. The info I do have has been provided by the district. As a parent and as a taxpayer, I deserve and expect equal access to information from all sides. The district is using the website, the taxpayer-funded website, as a soapbox and microphone to present their facts. This is not being done objectively, but rather in a tone that vilifies our teachers. This serves no one, least of all our children, who can read their comments online on their Chromebooks, and you know they are. They will return to school, and they will be expected to show their teachers respect. This is being undermined, and families are not being fairly informed. My question is, can the fact-checked be reworded to state the facts without opinion? And can the MEA be permitted to submit their facts on the same publicly funded forum? Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie Donnelly, Lower Providence. I don't have it written out well, but I have to say I'm really disappointed. I've spoken to many of you and elected many of you and know that that writing is not from you. I know that there's a lawyer involved, and I know there's a communication person. The lawyer, when he was hired, many of you were not on the board, and at that time, many of you spoke up against him. Why is he still there? We know he's not helping any of this. But to speak and to read what I read, and for the press conference that you spoke and the same lines were given, Mr. Boardman, was disappointing. I don't feel that those are your words, and I don't, it's come to this. And for these people, and that to be public, and it was awful. Social media is everywhere, and I expect that to happen, and people, it's nasty, and it's not fair. But for that to be written on our district website, and then to have the proposal there, as an educator, my husband and I read that, and it was appalling. And I think everyone here owes these people an apology for publicly putting facts that were opinion to sway people. It was awful. So I support a fair contract. I don't know the ins and outs, and I don't know what to believe, and that's disappointing. It's an embarrassment. And I know for a fact, all of you guys, I know those aren't your words, but somebody needs to speak up and say that those weren't their words. It is written from the district. So if it's written from the district, you're all there. I understand, Barbara, it wasn't your words, but if it's written from a district statement, it feels like it came from anybody here because nobody wrote their name to say who it did come from. So until somebody can say, or say I don't agree, unfortunately, it's a reflection of everybody here, and that was sad. And I know in my heart it's not everybody here's views or would agree with that posting. So, transportation, I've emailed you all. My son is on the bus now, an extra half hour, 2.5 hours to go 16 miles. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, he had a great opportunity. He's not in Methacton right now. But just because of that, he sits in a parking lot too, Mr. Roth, for 30 minutes when he transfers for that bus to leave. And my son is just as important as your kids. I don't care it's private school. I don't understand how I got that. I was told I understand because the PM, they lost a bus. They're down to 2 buses to 1, whatever it may be. Most of the kids are not going to be there. It probably won't be that time. But to get that call and not information, they've kind of given me information since then. Anyway, there's more than just, but I also feel transportation has broken down, but we as a school district need to take ownership of that. And it shouldn't take 2 weeks for us to address this and be involved. I don't know how nobody here at this, knew about it. Somebody in-house has to oversee what's going on if we're paying these people all that money to take care of it. It has to get, my daughter's 0.8 miles, 45-minute ride. Walks home, it's much quicker. But that needs to be addressed. But I think as a school district also need to take responsibility to fix that and be our hands. We keep saying and giving out blame to everybody else, but we need to take ownership of that too. Thank you.
Hi, Ralph Merja, Lower Providence Township, Methacton educator for 22 years. I just wanted to take a moment to read a quote from within the Methacton School District website, underneath the heading, All About Methacton. People make the difference for our children. The faculty and staff of the Methacton School District represent the very best that the field has to offer. Dedicated individuals who are invested in the growth and success of our students. Approximately 75% of our faculty members have obtained advanced degrees. Many involve themselves in our students' educational experience beyond the classroom as club sponsors, advisors, and coaches. Greater than 10% are members of another elite group. They're Methacton alumni. A figure like that demonstrates true loyalty and a sincere desire to be part of this community's future. As shown with the resignation of many experienced educators this past year, Methacton has lost veteran teachers to other local districts. The staff at Methacton should not be grouped with the lowest paid districts in the county while paying some of the highest health premiums. Dr. Zerbe, in May you were asked when you would step in to your role in negotiations. Your response was that you were ready to intervene and that you could settle the contract in a day. With all due respect, that day is upon us. Please do what is necessary to settle the contract. To the board, I know several of you and coached and taught some of your children, and it has been a pleasure. It is with utmost respect that I ask you to step up to your elected positions and do what is right for all of the stakeholders of Methacton. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Michaels, and I live on Lantern Lane in Audubon, and I'm also a life skills teacher at the high school. I recall that I was up in front of the board probably about 2 months ago talking about the special needs students and the Best Buddy program. Right after that board meeting, I had met with Dr. Zerbe, and we had talked about some things about the Best Buddies, and it wasn't my feeling because I worked there, but I expressed to him how parents were telling me that the students they felt maybe were being discriminated against because there was not a club for special needs students at the high school. We have lots of clubs, but not one specifically for them. And I know that that's not the case, that it was being looked at from a different perspective. But when Dr. Zerbe and I talked, and he thanked me for bringing a different perspective to him, I wanted to touch briefly on the bus situation. I know that a lot of the parents have contacted all of you, and you are totally familiar with the whole situation that occurred with the buses. And I wanted to just provide you a little bit more background on the 2 days that these things happened. What you have to understand is, you know, myself, Mrs. Brislin, and a few other teachers, you know, we're responsible each day for getting these students on these buses at the end of the day to make sure that they get home where they need to be. And on Thursday of last week, I was called out to the bus loop there, and 12 students are trying to be put on a Dodge minivan or whatever it was that clearly will not fit 12 students. Aside from the fact that the list that the driver had was all wrong, the addresses were wrong of where these students were going to go. So let's just say that the van had enough room for the students and we just let them get on, they would have gone to the wrong place of where they were supposed to be. Some were supposed to go to the Variety Club, not home, vice versa, and it was all mixed up. Some of these children, in addition to having intellectual disabilities, also have physical disabilities. So now, you know, put yourself in my place trying to get these students off the van, because now we're told that, we have to get them off, we have to put some on this van, some on this van. Try to get a student who, is intellectually disabled, trying to explain to them, no, this is not your van. We told you to get on here, now we're telling you to get off. Try to get a student that has physical disabilities who you worked to get on the van very carefully because it was different than the bus. Now we have to get them back off and put them on another van. And we're hoping that that's the correct van. Try to explain a student that has an intellectual disability that, yes, you take bus 58 every single day, but today you're not going to take bus 58. And try to deal with a student who will not move because he wants bus 58 because that is the bus that he takes every day. When representatives from the bus company came up and we asked, where is bus 58, where is bus 88? We were told, there is no more bus 58, there is no more bus 88. We had to spread the kids out and, put them on different cars or vans or whatever the case may be. We were not notified of this. We spoke to the parents. They were not notified of this, and you know all of this, but I wanted to give you a feel to be the ones to actually have to handle the situation. To have to work with these children and explain to them what's going on. The representative from the bus company came up, and I asked, why is this different now all of a sudden? And it was explained to us that because you're short drivers, they had to take the drivers from our buses, put them on the big buses, and then they could hire out to STA or whomever for the vans. So, again, and I'm not saying this is my perspective, but here we are back in the same place. What concerns me is we're back to parents thinking that possibly their child is being discriminated against, because we'll take the special needs kids bus driver and we'll just put them on something else and we'll use them for everybody else. And I know that that wasn't the thought there, but I guess what I want to convey is these are the kind of things that that we're hoping that people think about before decisions are made. You have to think about all this kind of stuff. You can't just make changes like that. And the question of who is making this change or who is in charge of this, we couldn't get an answer as to who was the individual that made the change. And I had parents emailing me, calling me, wanting to know who did this. And then I look foolish because I can't explain, I don't know. And they're like, well, you work at the school. What do you mean you don't know? You see what I'm saying? It just, we're talking about money. And again, this is the second case where, again, special needs kids are being put at risk here at the expense of something else. And I'm asking you, I feel like a lot of times these children are not looked out for. And again, I know that that's not the case, and I know that it's not purposely done. But again, I'm just asking that somebody look at these things, especially when it comes to the special needs kids. Somebody be responsible for checking to make sure that things are happening the way they're supposed to be. It's not right. And I understand the whole issue about outsourcing the bus company and so forth, but one lawsuit or two lawsuits because of the busing issue is going to negate all of the savings from outsourcing the bus situation. So what, it's in the end, is it going to cost you more to fix all the mistakes? And it seems like we're constantly reactive instead of proactive. We need to be looking at things proactively, anticipating what are the possible or potential issues from this decision, and let's make sure that they don't happen. Instead, we just make decisions and then we wait for the fallout and then try and handle it. And I'm asking you to please, for all children, but particularly for the special needs, because they don't always have a voice, that somebody be watching out for them, and somebody please be making sure that any time a decision is made, that somebody is aware of what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Tyru, and I live in Worcester Township. This is actually the first time I'm attending these meetings, and for the most part, it is due to the transportation issue, which I am pretty sure if you recall the name Tyru, you've seen my email.
I'm having trouble catching your last name.
Tyru, T as in Tom, A-I-R-U.
Thank you.
I have heard the board, and it seems that what is really missing here is accountability. There's been a lot of excuses that I've heard this evening, and no actionable items moving forward. For me, today, I do have one student that's at Worcester and a student that is in a non-public school. The student in the non-public school was not picked up this morning. I don't know what the reason. I did call, and I did not get through to anyone. When I got my child to school, the teacher said every single student that is supposed to come out of his bus were driven to school this morning. There was no communication from the school or first student or the transportation center with regards to why my son was not picked up. I was flabbergasted by the fact that there was no response from the school. That's one. Two, it is important that the school district realizes that as parents, we are to work hand in hand to provide and produce the best educational outcomes for our kids. I do understand as a parent that it is my responsibility. One of the issues that I had was moving my bus stop this year. Due to first students' review, sight and safety concerns from moving from inside of a street to a corner of a street where you have cars that go up to 60 miles per hour. Earlier this summer, just one street over, on the same road, there was a major car accident. And in my email to the board and the transportation system, I encouraged to pull the police report. Every single parent on that street is extremely concerned about this move. And I've not been given any logical or detailed reasoning as to why this happened, except the fact that it was a safety concern. There are no documented incidents over the past, I've lived on that street for the past 11 going on 12 years. And as a parent, for the school district to make unilateral decisions, it's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. It is frustrating for us where there's a lack of communication with regards to transportation issues. I was on the phone, I have a letter in my hand, I'm speaking to someone on the transportation. She's telling me one time that my kid is supposed to be picked up, and I have a letter that states another time. And I do understand that the ball continues to move, I get that. But it's also the responsibility of the school district or whatever provider that's been hired to communicate effectively and efficiently. I apologize, this is not directed to any person tonight, but there has to be accountability. We speak amongst ourselves, and the one thing that is clear is, who do you complain to? The issue that happened this morning with my son, after I could not reach someone, I just practically gave up. I said, what else do I do? Secondly, for the issue that is at hand with the parents, with the teachers striking, I don't know the ins and outs of the details. I don't. I'm not educated on it, and I have not been. But what I do realize that as a parent, it is affecting my child. We have to come to a compromise for the sake of our children. She's been at home now for the past 2 days, and I received an email this afternoon stating that if this strike goes on beyond October 12th. And all I can think to myself is, a third grader is going to be at home until October 12th. And I am hopeful, for the sake of our kids, for the sake of the teachers, that we are able to come to a compromise to be able to get these kids back to school. As a citizen of Worcester, as a taxpayer, I am deeply concerned, both with the transportation issues as well as the strike that's going on. You hear about strikes, but I never thought that it would be coming this close to home. Let's get this resolved, please. Thank you.
My name is Lori Costanza, Lower Providence Township. Can you hear me? Down, I'm short. Lori Costanza, Lower Providence Township. I've lived in this wonderful school district for going on 33 years now. And I can see no reason how or why the compensation for this sea of people in green here has dropped near the bottom of the county. It doesn't represent our community values or where we live. I don't think that the administrative salaries are at the bottom. I think that they've been able to hold them around the middle, which is all where the teachers always were, as far as I understood. They shouldn't be that low. I thought we were going to be spending about $2 million on sports fields, and unless I'm mistaken, I think that this came in at about $8 million. If our children are going to have careers, it's going to be because of what these people do. Very few children get to college on athletic scholarships or become professional athletes. Again, if I recall correctly, one of the rationales that I heard for closing the Audubon School was that we can't pay our teachers fairly. Well, we closed the school, and where's the money? It should be with them. Now, I know that the district is not broke. There's a war chest. I think there's about another $8 million in it. I know that it's not what anyone wants to do to spend that money, but we've got to get these teachers compensation out of the basement and find another way to replenish that money if we have to. When I first moved here, my school taxes were $500 a year. Now I'm just under $10,000, but I don't mind. Our kids are the most precious thing that we have, and we owe them to be taught by people who are compensated well, who don't have morale problems. And if we are thinking that we need to provide incentives to attract and retain good bus drivers, I think that we need to treat these people fairly. And I think I speak for many, many people in this community. I no longer have children in the school district, but I'm happy to pay for it. And one further question. What have we paid in attorney's fees to Mr. Sultanic and his firm? What have we paid them to get us to this point? I think that we all can do better because I think we all care about the same things. Can someone tell me what the attorney's fees have been so far?
Can you please finish up, please? Thank you.
Is there another way to say that without tone? I'm a taxpayer. This podium belongs to me.
Ma'am, can you
That
please
is all.
finish up?
Yes, I will finish up.
Thank you, appreciate
And
it.
I thank you very much for your time, but please find the money for these people and get the kids back to school.
Before you start, our policy is 3 minutes, and we're trying to
I got
listen to
3.
everybody. And while I'm not adhering to exactly 3 minutes, we would like to try to keep it within a reasonable amount of time.
I timed it. You're good. My name is Kip Markle, and I'm a resident of Worcester, and I'm in my 19th year teaching in the district, 17 years in first grade. How did we get here? How did we get to this point where your teachers are on strike? This is not a good thing. For me, this strike is about so much more than benefits and salary. It is about the complete disregard and disrespect the administration and the school board has for its teachers. Please know when I speak of the administration, I do not mean the principals. The principals are working tirelessly every day to fix the mess that the district has created. So how did we get here? This is how I feel that some of the reasons that we got here. The school board hiring a lawyer to do the negotiations before even beginning negotiations. At the very first meeting which I attended, he told us that the district had no money for us and that we better just agree to no salary increases. The faster we agreed to that, the better it would be. But of course the district does have money. How we got here: a reading series for the elementary school that cost over $700,000 when our reading scores are among the highest in the state. A reading series that when teachers asked if we could delay a year due to the closing of Audubon, we didn't say no. We said, can we delay it? The district answered no. A reading series that we picked by looking through boxes of books. No presentations, no piloting, and 2 half-days of training. How we got here: $6 million turf fields and lights that really cost $8.5 million. How we got here: a study about enrollment that suggested we should close Audubon, then another study and more data and thousands more dollars spent that suggested the same, and then yet another study that cost the taxpayers more money. How we got here: it seems that the district wants to close Arrowhead Elementary School now and reconfigure Skyview, and there was a lot of figures being thrown around. One I wrote down, $8.5 million in year 1, and $84 million, there were so many I couldn't keep track. And apparently you want to furlough 20 to 40 more teachers. How we got here: 3 business managers in less than a year. How we got here: the complete mismanagement of transportation, which cost $6.8 million. How we got here: our willingness to take pay freezes in the last 2 contracts. We are no longer willing to do that, as you have the money to pay us. How we got here: the district hiring a PR firm to the tune of $10,000 so that you can put on your website whatever you want to.
Please finish up.
How we got here is on you. Your teachers have been carrying this district. We only want a fair contract. Thank you.
My name's Laura Nonamaker. I'm a parent in Methacton, and I live in Audubon. And I'll start by saying, of course she timed it to 3 minutes. That's the woman who taught my kid how to be organized. It wasn't me. I first want to ask a question that I think is rhetorical, but if it's not, stop me and answer it about transportation. With talking about subs, finding drivers, pooling dispatchers, I'm worried that First Student or MCIU or Methacton, ultimately who is going to fall on, is not fully complying with the Child Protective Services law requirements. That's a safety issue for our kids, and it's a CYA issue for us as a district. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to look into that, because if they're pulling people from wherever at the last minute, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that that's not happening. And regarding the contract negotiations, I have 2 kids in the district, and every single one of my kids' teachers to date, they're in 4th grade now, have been an absolute godsend. They have exceeded my expectations. They've exceeded their job descriptions, I assure you of that. And you're talking about, with fixing busing, I think the words that you used were, we can look under rocks to find the money. If I have to choose between buses and these teachers, I pick them. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. This morning I developed a list of 22 topics worth commenting on in this arena. However, not only is there a time limit, but I also consider information overload on the listeners. The most important topics are the current work stoppage / future tax increases, excess high school staff, and continuous busing issues. As for the MEA's choice of a salary schedule, anyone at step 12 last year will, by the 3rd contract year, have an increase of $21,000 to $23,000. Then they are part of the teacher group with salaries of $81,500 to $105,000 per year. This defies logic and just leads to more insane retirement benefits, presuming PSERS has the money, even before Social Security that starts at age 66. It's like we don't have an HR office that considers issues such as fairness with our taxpayers and fairness with all of our teachers. As to excess high school staff, there is some recognition of this in this year's budget and the key issues memo of about September 11th, but years after I first exposed it. I guess teacher tenure is a job for life here if we can just raise taxes and we have at least as many students as teachers. Perhaps Mr. Sorgini will fix this topic. Before we okay this MEA contract, or one fairer to taxpayers, we need to ask if within the index, is there any money left to use towards other cost increases and the huge deferred renovation tab in each contract year. There is lots of talk about excessive use of consultants here in a wide variety of assignments. One example is busing, a necessary function. There are continuous issues and the growing involvement of outside software gurus, the MCIU, and First Student over 3 consecutive years, and we still have a ton of stranded students that goes on and on. Perhaps heads must roll. The board's faith and administration ought to be wearing thin, thinner, or thinnest.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sherry Polidor. I'm from Lower Providence. I have 2 sons in the district, a senior and an 8th grader. I felt compelled to speak tonight after reading your Setting the Facts Straight post yesterday on the district website. For me, any facts were lost in the letter's tone towards our teachers. One of the most important things we teach our children is respect. We tell them they need to show respect to their parents, their elders, their friends, and especially their teachers. More than that, though, we teach respect by example. Your letter yesterday demonstrated the complete opposite with the disrespect that you showed towards our teachers. And it was posted on the website for all our kids to read. What an appalling and disappointing example you set. 25 years ago, I chose to move into the Methacton School District because of its reputation. I knew my children would receive a high-quality education. In that 25 years, I've watched numerous boards and superintendents mismanage our district. I've seen taxpayer dollars spent on frivolous things while educational programs, buildings, transportation, teachers, and ultimately students have taken a back seat. It is the teachers working with the students and parents as a team that made Methacton a desirable district for families. Despite the mismanagement that I've witnessed, my sons are still receiving an exemplary education. I thank each and every one of their teachers for that. Their compassion, patience, and professionalism while working with the many demands put on them today is admirable. They have and deserve 100% of my respect, and they should have yours as well. It is time for this district to get its priorities straight. You get what you pay for. I do not want my tax dollars spent on expensive law firms and PR firms that are here to twist facts. I want my money spent on education, building upgrades, fixing transportation, and most of all, keeping the dedicated teachers who have given my children a quality education. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Diana Kernop, and I'm co-president of the Methacton Education Association, and I have the proud privilege to represent over 410 phenomenal teachers. The teachers in this district are the people that have carried this district through tough times, and in every turn, they have always taken the high road, no matter what, no matter how they've been talked to, how they've been treated, and if they've been disrespected. I listened to your offer tonight, Mr. Boardman. It's the first time I heard it. I think it's an interesting way to negotiate. I would think that if you had an offer like that you could have shared it with the association through the mediator, rather than airing it publicly and trying to box us in. We would not do that to you. I've had the good fortune to sit across the table from many of you, and as individuals, I respect the position that you hold, and I respect your position in how you view the district as needing to run. But at some point, we need to find a fair compromise for you and a fair compromise for us. That's what bargaining is. And we can't expect to keep the people that work here in the trenches in the lower part of the county with high premium shares. I would like to ask you, Mr. Boardman, if your offer is going to expire tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
What I just read?
Yes.
No, I want you to go put some thought in it and discuss it and see if it's appropriate for you.
Okay. I would hope We have a bargaining session scheduled for tomorrow at 3 o'clock. I would hope that we both come to the table with the idea of working as hard as we can on the things that we're close to try to resolve these issues. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at 3 to try to settle this contract. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rebecca Catagnis. I live in Lower Providence. My husband is a former Philadelphia public school teacher and is now a professor at Valley Forge Military College. First, I'd like to thank the board for keeping the interest of the taxpayers in mind as they work with the teachers. I think the board's proposal for arbitration with the union was not only fair to the teachers, but was also mindful of the burdens placed on residents in the state of Pennsylvania's current budget crisis. Secondly, not all residents are benefactors of the Methacton School District. There are many who live here that homeschool, cyber school, use charter schools, or pay for private education. There are low-income residents and seniors on fixed incomes. They should all be considered when an increase in teachers' pay and benefits are, because they will be the ones that are footing the bill. Teachers are not the only ones impacted by the decisions of benefits. There has also been a lot of comparison to school districts, and I think this is unfair to the township because our township does not have the same tax base as some of these other districts. For example, Upper Merion has the King of Prussia Mall to aid in their teachers' salaries and benefits. Comparing school districts is not a fair matrix because this is not a free market system. It is a public system, and variables in pay from one district to another are not determined by a market. They are determined by taxpayers and the ability of taxpayers to pay for it. Teachers are important, but so are parents and families, and working more hours to pay more property taxes isn't good for kids. Lastly, I'd like to remind the teachers that this strike imposes a huge burden for working families and impacts the students greatly. Allow the arbitration process to take place. I'm with the school board.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Diane McTamney-Guyan, Lower Providence. I think the word that's coming to my mind if I was doing a Wordle, just because I'm a teacher, just to get that out there, is chaos. I don't know who's in charge. I don't know who's running the show. I don't know where the leadership is. We cut, and then there's chaos. So I realize there's certain things we can't go back and change, but it's clear we need a transportation manager. My district next door, North Penn, uses first student. We have 13,000 students. My students are on time to school every day. It's 17 schools. So I think we need a transportation manager. Let's get working on that. The press release, I will submit my name for writing. I want to know who authorized putting that on the website. I want to know what members of the board saw that prior to it being put on the website. I want to know if Dr. Serby saw that. I want to know who's sitting here in front of me, or if you would do it right now, raise your hand that you're okay with that. Because right now, the trust of this community is completely eroded. I cannot believe you said these teachers are not setting a good example. I was going to bring my daughter here tonight because she had a few things to say to you, but I have her in bed. Don't you dare ever talk about teachers like that. I'm not just saying that as a teacher. How about we start with being able to trust everyone in front of me? Because right now I feel like I can't. Because things are being said, I can't tell what's true. We have, fellow teachers on social media posting about what this district has versus hers. We have complete chaos. So let's say that we can trust you. I want to know who was okay with that press release. I want you to, raise your hand, say, I agree with it, I don't agree with it, I didn't see it. But the fact is, nobody knows who's running this ship. It's kind of freaking me out a little bit, I'm not going to lie. I know a lot of the community don't understand the arbitration thing. just so you get it, I know to the public it seems like the teachers are being unreasonable, but here's the deal. I've done this for 20 years. We could go through all this, and then the arbiter or the fact finder is going to say, okay, maybe they'll say what the school board wants. Maybe they'll say what the teachers want. Then if one side rejects it, we're back to square one. We just dragged this out for 6 more months. So here's the thought. If we're really at a difference of 1% in health care, sit down tomorrow and get it done, just like every other school board got it done before you. We don't need to drag this out. Be done with it. And finally, I don't know where people are saying there's all this excess capacity, because I, ask my kids and count how many kids are in their classes. They're around 25. So for 4 to 8, I'm sorry if that's excess capacity. Do any of you right now, home with your kids, want 25 of your kids' friends for 8 hours? No. Okay? I love my students dearly, but 25 12-year-olds is enough to give them attention. There's high school teachers teaching 6 classes with class sizes of 27 to 33. I moved here 20 years ago because I want better for my kids. I don't want my kids in line behind 165 other kids for attention like right now my students are. Don't keep making mistakes that other people are. Get it done tomorrow, not with arbiters. You do it, every other board did. Thank you.
My name is Julia Hackenberry. I am an alumni of Methacton. My brother is a senior. I just moved back to Audubon. Sorry, I'm nervous and upset, and I'll try to be eloquent and respectful, unlike the message that was on the district website. Speaking of, talking about setting an example for our students, these people are setting an example. They're showing how to stand up for themselves and advocate for themselves, which is exactly what we need to be showing our students. Showing my brother, just saying. I'm seeing this sign that says best staff. And these are the best staff, and they need to be compensated fairly and compensated to show that they are the best staff, to show that they are the best that this county has to offer. And I'm hearing people that have moved to this area in order to give their children the best opportunity for education, and they have that in these people, and they need to be compensated to show the rest of the county that you can compensate them for the staff that they are, which is amazing. And I'm looking out and I'm seeing faces of people that were my teachers, and it's amazing that they're still here, even though they put up with the insert word here that has gone on for years. I mean, honestly, how can they continue to put up with this? And I hope that this comes to a fair and respectful resolution, because they deserve that, and I don't know that you want to continue to go through this either. So that's, do we get 6 minutes or 3 for 2 people?
My name's Sam Hackenberry. I'm her brother. I'm a current senior. I'm only 18 years old. I like to think I know a lot, but I know very little. But I do know when I walk in those halls every day that I'll see smiling faces, hellos, how's your family, what's going on. I'll see teachers that care. I know that every single teacher will take time out of their day, spending time with their family to help me, using their resources to help me, helping other students with whatever they need to get the grades, to get into college. If they have personal issues, anything, they'll do anything for them. I know that really the teacher's the only thing that matters. Walls, roofs, buses, the chairs that you're sitting in don't matter without those teachers. So just get it done. That's all I have to say.
Joe Ferrero, 12 Pine Tree Drive. The gentleman who just spoke probably learned the biggest lesson that you need to know in life, that you don't know nothing. Because once you acknowledge that, you can learn everything. All of you people who are elected, you stand for election, you say, oh, I'm Mr. Management, I'm Mr. Business, I run things like a business. I'm trying to understand the management philosophy that you drag your employees into the mud and you make them feel like crap. I've seen these teachers here go through non-contract for 20 months, was it, one time? You guys worked through non-contract. Yeah, I'm addressing you.
Thank you.
I'm addressing you. To get these people to walk out, that's an achievement. That's really an achievement. You know, I don't understand how you can sit here and say we're managing stuff. You know, you've got something gold here and you're fumbling it. Whether you fumble out the buses, whether you fumble out the food services, whether you fumble out how many people that you guys have outsourced. This isn't a game of outsource and bust the union. These are our neighbors. We want them compensated well enough so that they can live here comfortably. Not that they have to live someplace else. And it's wrong for you guys to rake them over. We're in competition. You know what? We're in competition with Valley Forge Military Academy. We want to be able to poach their talent to come here and teach. We want to poach, Boyertown if we lose a teacher. We want to be able to poach from TE, from Radnor, from Lower Merion. We want their talent here. If we can't have this talent, we should be expanding these guys. And when they come and they get advanced degrees, you compensate for that. If you want professionals, you pay professionals. If you want amateurs, okay, you cut them to the core. But to have them teach our children and disrespect them on health, to disrespect them the way that it's been done, don't run for election again.
Hi, I'm Brian DeMerg. I'm from Worcester. Just here to bring solutions. One thing I see, you only give a $5,000 balance for your credit card limit. If you paid everything but payroll via credit card, you get 2% back. $120,000 a year in transportation. I mean, these are realistic facts. If you bond your money out now for the future site of Woodland on the hedging interest rate, you could save $10 million alone on that. There is so much that I see here, like I read in the facts and contracts, that with a little financial guidance, it can pay for itself. On the buses, I don't let my daughter take the bus on the way home because it's an hour, 10 minutes. Right now, all the bus drivers should be running routes while the strikes are off and getting it right. And then you guys should be getting the feedback by Friday afternoon from the bus drivers themselves and getting that done. You know, I'm happy to send you guys an email of all the different things that I know of. I actually am an accountant. My dad was a math teacher. I know the money. I have small class sizes. There's a lot of programs that you may already be aware of. DCED, all the grocery stores should be doing this, the EITC and the OSDC tax credits. Also within DCED, you could get the roof paid for, or 50% of it paid for Woodland through their community economic outreach as a key partner in Latchkey Kids and programs. You know, the transportation for disabled people can actually be run through the schools or subcontracted to different daycares. You can actually receive tax money from the state to do that. There's a lot of programs out there that I think you guys are missing. A lot of money, free money. Let's bring it here.
Thank you.
Heather Galsby Steiner, Sunnyside Avenue, Eagleville Trooper, whatever you want to call it. I know many of the board members. I'm friends with the board members. I'm friends with many of the teachers. The first thing, transportation. I have one that just graduated, and I have two right now. The first day of school, my son's bus stop, The bus driver fortunately stopped and said, "I don't have you on the list. You're not my bus stop." But that was the bus number we were given, the time. It's been changed 4 times so far, 2 different buses. Currently, he is the 5th to last stop, which runs late. He's made it to homeroom 1 time. The rest of the time, it's middle of first period when he gets there. His bus right now, when they get on, and there's 3 boys at our bus stop, when they get on, they're hard-pressed to find a seat. By the time that bus gets there, they're sitting at least 3 to a seat with those 5 extra stops, and they're late. So it may not be at true capacity what the bus says it needs to be at, but when you're dealing with Arcola and high school kids, they need more room. You cannot squish 60 kids of high school and middle school stature on those buses. My daughter's bus, she was out the first week of school. The second week of school, I would think that the bus would be fixed. It was late. We got a time change. We met at the bus with the new time change. The bus driver had no idea there was a time change. So there's communication issues with that. As far as the strike is concerned, I have friends on both sides. We moved to this district almost 10 years ago. I picked this district over other areas. We moved from Arkansas, which is ranked 48 or 49 out of 50 schools out of the states. So we knew we were coming to a better area to begin with. I picked this for the music, and I picked it for the reputation. The music program has been a godsend for my kids. I'm an active parent in the Music Boosters. I am an active parent in school stuff. I was a former home and school board member for 4 or 5 years, so I get it. These teachers care. My daughter was in the hospital over the summer and into the first week of school. I had her former teachers and other teachers checking on her all summer. You won't get that with other school districts. I really feel that you need to work it out and make a fair contract for both parties, and let's get the kids in school because they're driving me nuts at home.
Thank you.
Hi, this is the first time I've ever been here, so I don't know. My name is Catherine Krupewski. My daughter Madison, she's in 6th grade. I have a son at Eagleville and a daughter at Eagleville. Last year, horrible.
Excuse me, where do you live? Which town?
Oh, I'm sorry. I live in off of Oakland Avenue in Eagleville.
Okay, thank you.
KrupieWski. So, Madison, who is special, she's in learning support classes. Last year, horrible year. I was constantly in the school, constantly calling, "You're not following her IEP." I had a teacher tell me, "Sorry, it's not my job. It's my supervisor that made her math." And there every month, finally, I sat down and wrote a letter and said, "I'm going to get this Board of Education involved. You need to follow her IEP." Go on and on. Bus transportation last year, my son, ADD, ADHD was diagnosed. Got written up for having Pokemon cards on the school bus. Went into the principal's office, called transportation. They told me to call Tim for special education to get him on a short bus. I said, "That's unacceptable. This kid has rode the bus. There should be no reason why my kid has to sit on the bus and can't do Pokemon." They said, "Okay, we'll color on the bus." So if my kid starts coloring or another kid starts coloring on the school bus, who's going to get in trouble for that? My kid, because my kid got the approval to color on the bus on crayons and paper. So then it went on. This year, Madison is loving school. She's coming home, doing extra math, making sure her grades, she wants to get out of learning support. Last year was a rough year. This year she wants to be in school, and here we are, not in school. We need to figure out how to get these kids back in school, because if I have another crazy year like last year, I'll be here complaining about every single teacher. Because it's not fair to the students, it's not fair to the faculty, it's not fair to the parents or you. Everybody's yelling at everybody. You got to think about these kids that are sitting here or sitting at home waiting to find out if they're going to have school tomorrow. That's not fair to anybody. Thank you.
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I think the board, you need to stop letting people from outside this district create this environment, this animosity, these tiers. I think there are people on the board here that would do a good job in reasonable negotiations with a reasonable leadership from the MEA, and you would get to an agreement, and you would come together, and you wouldn't have the feelings that are in this auditorium that I knew would come a year ago. I knew this would happen. You just need to not let people from outside the district sell you a bill of goods, and you just need to get to a reasonable settlement. That's what I have to say about the contract. Okay, because when you go to fact-finding, the business office and the district office is going to work their tail off creating about 3 or 4 binders about this thick. MEA is going to do the same thing. They're going to present testimony. One side's going to accept, one side's going to reject, and we're going to have 3 doorstops that cost us $250,000. That's what we're going to get from it. So you need to just negotiate as a board and what you feel this district needs and be reasonable with each other. And believe me, it'll happen because other districts have tried this and they don't try it anymore, and everything seems to work out pretty good. As far as transportation goes, you know, the reason you got through the 14-15 school year is because the routes weren't blown up, and you had Mary Beth Pastino working like a... The few times I visited to pick my wife up there, I watched Mary Beth Pastino orchestrate the problems that would occur, okay? Like that. At the map, on the computer, on the phone, directing people on the phone. It happened, you know, but somebody, well, she's not here anymore for some reason. My wife's at home. She just handed in more corrected corrections to her run. It had more red ink on it, or it reminded me, it had so much red ink on it, it reminded me of my high school essays after they were graded. And she handed that in Monday, okay? She's basically, and she's one driver, but I'm sure a lot of drivers are doing this, she's basically doing the work of the computer. Okay? This guy's going to take that and he's going to stick it in, make the changes and everything like that. Another thing my wife encountered, she transports to Germantown Academy, so she had 2 days before Germantown Academy started, so she thought she would help out here for 2 days. And she went to her mailbox and got the run she was going to do the first day of school, and it said disconnected pathway, disconnected pathway, disconnected pathway between the stops. She didn't know whether to go left or right out of the garage, out of the driveway. That was the computer run, the computer-generated run. And like I said last month, she was going to bid on a run that had her punching in at 310, but the school let out at 255, you know, private school. That was another thing that got handed out. As far as the Power Schools item, you know, who sits down and compares last year's roll that was in the system to this year's roll, and who ticks off the names, who checks the addresses, who's going down the list? That's too much like work these days for people. You know, nobody checks that. How am I going to Instagram, Facebook, tweet, and all that stuff if I got to check off 3,300 names and addresses to make sure that they're right? I understand mailings went out to the wrong addresses. The thing that broke my heart the most was when I heard stories about these special needs kids. That cut me to the core. I could not believe how these special needs people were treated. Simple pick up the phone, simple verify things, simple get out there and check it out. You know, that broke my heart.
Can you finish up, please?
And I'm getting a headache listening to all this stuff. I can imagine what you're going through, because I didn't run my show like this. And the 35 years I spent in school business, I think the board needs to take a hard look at what's going on here. We lost business managers. We lost Bob Harney, the HR director, the assistant to the superintendent. We lost him too. We're losing people left and right. So I think you need to take a hard look at what's going on here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kira Kapler, and I am a resident of Worcester. And this is Elena Bowers. Oh, sorry. And she is also a resident of Worcester. So I'd like to start by saying I think it's most important to see the point of view from the students themselves. That's why we were sitting over there, and originally we had decided that we did not want to speak, but after seeing all this overwhelming support from the community, we decided that it would be unique to see input from students themselves. So first, I'm just curious, I have a question that I'd like to get answered. As a student going through the college application process, I'm just curious to know if it is true that the teachers' emails, district emails, have been shut down, if anyone wants to speak on that. Okay. Quite frankly, there's too much to be done for college. A lot of kids want to put in their applications, early decision, early action, and I think it's unacceptable to cut communication with the teachers that we've previously set up plans with. I don't think it's fair to us. I don't think it's fair to them. It puts a delay in the process, and I know for a fact that colleges do like to see students who put out their applications early, and I'm sure that that pushes us back in the acceptance as well. So, also, I think it's interesting that so many of these community members have come up to you with their concerns, whether it be busing, whether it be with contract negotiations, but the passion that these people show to support these teachers should show something to you. I have personally established many relationships that go beyond the classroom with these teachers. I know for a fact that they go above and beyond the duties of any role of a teacher to support us as students. And personally, I've had teachers that stay late after school to help me, that come out to community events to support me, even sent personal letters to my parents to explain their satisfaction with me as a student, which I have to admit is all due to them. I cannot stress enough how much these teachers have had an impact on my life and shaped the person I have become today. To disrespect them in the ways that we've seen in these past week has felt like a personal attack, honestly, and I hope that you actually listen to our community members, to these teachers who deserve the world and more for everything they do for us, and I hope it reflects in the decision-making process that will happen tomorrow.
I just wanted to say one more thing. Kira pretty much covered a lot of it.
Can you state your name and where you're from?
Elena Bowers, and I'm from Worcester. I was a new student last year, and I had 2 friends. These teachers taught me to be independent, and they taught me that I can be myself and I can make friends. They taught me to respect myself. And seeing you disrespect them hurts. It's not fair. It's not fair to our younger siblings. It's not fair to the elementary school kids. That impacts them. It's an attack on the teachers, and it's not okay. I see so many people sitting there who care about me and my friends and everyone who goes to our schools. I see people sitting in front of me who do not care about me or our teachers. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Katie Thiel. I'm from Lower Providence. Mr. Boardman, you and I have emailed a couple times. Thank you for your information. I just really have one thing that I want to say. We're in the age of social media, and the information, which has already been said, it has been hard to hear. And hard to figure out, not hard to hear. The facts have been, there are some facts that are there, but I personally have always felt that there are pieces that are missing, and I know that these are contract negotiations, so there should be, but there's pieces missing, but the information that has been shared, and that the way it was shared has the social media sites, the Facebook page for Lower Providence lighting up. Like my phone should catch on fire from what I'm reading. And it's all about, a lot of them are attacking our teachers. And it's also my conversations with my neighbors and with the parents of my friends, of my son's friends. And it's hard to read this knowing that hopefully tomorrow, you'll reach an agreement because my son's still home. But this will be my son's teacher next week and in 3 weeks. And this is the teacher, this is Mrs. Fisher, who saved my son Teddy's, he had a great year last year because of her. And they take, and these are just, it's hard to read what is being written that everyone else can read. It's damaging, and it's damaging our community. And I just think, please be careful with how things are worded and the information that's shared, because we all live here, and we all have to look at them in the face and thank them for how they treat our kids when they're annoying or they're wonderful, because it's important. That's all I want to say. I think social media is making this much more damaging than it already is. So thank you so much.
Hi, Cindy Peters, Audubon. I'm just really nervous, number one, but I sat here the whole time, and the accountability is just the thing that doesn't seem to be being answered. You've had a million comments about transportation, all negative. And I couldn't quite figure out how long that contract is with First Union. I'm not sure. Was it a one-year contract? I don't know the ins and outs. But you don't seem to be batting an eye to pay them $6 million. After negative comment, they're not doing their job. Yet we pay them. And we keep them. These people are showing up every day, giving their more time to our children than their own, and you don't want to give them what's fair. I don't see the sense in that. I would like an answer tomorrow from the board. Who is responsible for making sure my tax money for the $6 million we are paying First Union is worth it? Everybody here has had something to say, but I still don't know who's in charge of that decision. Who is responsible for making sure we're getting our money's worth? We're getting our money's worth from them. They deserve to be paid for it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I appreciate everybody sharing their thoughts. If we have nothing else.
I think you mentioned board members could speak. I'd just like to briefly to a couple of the comments.
Sure.
First, thank everyone for coming out. That's the one thing I like about this community. It's very engaged. I thought sitting here closing Audubon would be the hardest thing I've ever done as a board member. Tonight's pretty darn close. I came here to preserve education and protect teachers, and I told a few people that I feel like a failure. It's not as easy as anybody thinks that it is. I wanted to address wonders because that's one of the things that has occurred since many of us are on the board, and Ms. Markle brought it up. As the chair of the Education Committee, I was part of approving that. Paul, Brenda, and myself were concerned about putting that onto the teachers right after math. We discussed it at length. We decided, for many reasons, it was okay to do. And I won't get into that now because it's late. And I did speak to very few teachers, not many, and there were concerns, but there was also, I teach English language arts, and we all of us had been using very old and dated materials, trying to supplement. So that was meant as a positive, so I apologize if that is not how many of you feel. As far as the 2 half-day trainings, one thing I had mentioned at the Education Committee meetings was, please don't bog down these teachers with unnecessary trainings, because we all sat in those trainings, and sometimes they're not very helpful. I said, please give them independent time. If you're going to put a second curriculum on them, please give them independent time to really work with the material. So, sounds like it's kind of, you know, it's hard to make a happy medium. Last meeting, there was you all were very offended by the PR firm. And I thought I was being courteous by keeping my mouth closed about the PR firm because it was hired because of a possible strike. From my point of view, this is the first strike in Methacton in 35 years. And we were hoping it wasn't going to happen, but if it did, we didn't feel prepared to handle the public relations. But I have to take accountability because I did vote yes. So you're shaking your head at me, I understand that, but I'm taking accountability for that action of hiring the PR firm. As far as approving the messaging, no. I'm not going to get into that. A woman brought up something that I did with social media. It has been said that it's a conflict. This is where I'm going to try not to get upset. It's been said that it's a conflict to have an educator on the school board. And it would be better if I was retired, but I'm not. So it is somewhat of a conflict during these negotiations, and that's why I've not been a part of it. I'm not excusing anything. I know that Paul Winters is one of the kindest, even-keeled men I know. So I hope that's where I hold. But if I have offended anyone, I will let you know that at my own union meeting, I stood up, this was before all of this, and just said, guys, to my own union, we need to fight. Methacton has a very strong union. They have things in their contract that are good for education. They have fought for some of those things, and I won't get into lots of details, but an example is recess aids and some tuition reimbursement. So if I ever expressed that I'm not unhappy that you have those things, I'm happy that you have those things. I think I was more upset I didn't. So that is where the conflict of interest lies. So if I have offended anybody by that, I apologize. This is not easy for anybody here. I do apologize for the tone of that message from me. Everybody in this room wants a fair contract. And that's all I will say. And I think I did want to address the disrespect comment. If there's anything we need to know as a board, please, at a time, share it with us, because I don't know where that I don't know what exactly is meant by that. What it means is when you say the administration, I don't know examples. I mean, other than the contract. Obviously, that is upsetting to you. I will just say, end of story. They're all nervous. I'm going to say something I'm not allowed to say, and I promise I won't. I think all of us who have children in your classes have respected you, and I know that that's different than sitting on this table, but I do respect all the hard work that you have shown my children and all the children in this district. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. All those in favor? Thank you for coming out tonight, everybody.